So if you ever had questions about the nature of lost civilizations and like the whole mysterious time period, like that's what I do.
Okay.
To a very deep level where I take it from a very serious academic level though.
Right. Okay.
Always evidence driven. I'm working with a lot of archaeologists around the world to uncover this. Yeah. So that's where I blur into a whole nother place where I'm not like in opposition. Like a lot of these guys are like in opposition, like, you know, them, like they're not telling us the truth. I'm actually working with them. And it's like, I'm under the understanding. It's like, okay, it's okay that they have a narrative that they want to stick to. But if you come at it with like a really friendly, cooperative approach, you can just end up working together.
So you are like bridging the gap between the conventional mainstream archaeologists, geologists, climatologists, all this stuff, and like the alternative stuff.
That's exactly what my goal is.
Right. Okay.
So Danny, I guess you could say my purpose in all of this that I am very deeply driven is to bridge, like you said, that gap between the academic world and the alternative history world, as it's called, which is a very sad term that they're using because it's not really alternative history. It's exploring history through truth, through objective analysis and understanding. And so one of the things that's the most sad to me as being someone who's a well-studied academic in that area is that the entire basis of science has actually quite broken down into a place that is very unfortunate because science is about the objective search for truth, no matter what. Like you just go where the evidence is. You don't have a predetermined expectation of what it's going to be. So if you have evidence that comes up that challenges that traditional narrative, it's in your duty to explore it, not to decide to ignore it, purely based on all the shoulders of other men and women that have come before you that have laid down some kind of a timeline narrative. That's why science is broken right now. Because science is no longer explores things just based on the evidence and on what the truth is. It's actually just based on agendas and based on predetermined expectations for things. And so that's where I come into this with a place of being well studied, where I know what they're looking for evidence, and I'm not silly, like I'm coming at this just throwing out information and random things where they're like, oh, well, he's got nothing to base it on. Like that, no, if anything, we're uncovering pieces of evidence and dating mechanisms that have potentially never been available before.
So I'm really excited for this podcast because I know there's a lot of different directions we're going to end up going. I watched a couple of your episodes with Julian Doyle, which were fantastic. And, look, you're here to be my tour guide today. So I'm going to hold your hand and you're going to take me on a magic carpet ride through the history of Mesopotamia, Egypt, all this stuff. So first of all, where have you been recently? Like explain like the travels that you've been doing this past year with your documentary and what you were looking at in Turkey and all that.
Sure. I have spearheaded, I started this, God, it was over a year and a half ago, to develop a documentary. And the reason for that was that I felt as though the things that I was connecting with and finding and studying were so important and so significant that they needed a certain kind of medium, a certain way that the world could see them, right? It's not, if you and I just talking on a podcast is great. It's one thing, but providing people with a journey where they get to actually go and almost be there and see these things being found and in the field and analysis done on them and studied. I want people to go on, the whole purpose of this documentary is I want people to go on that adventure. This isn't a talking heads documentary. This is an adventure around the world. We successfully filmed in 6 countries. That is not something that often typically happens. You're let alone if you even get a couple countries, which was not easy to do. Permits and getting relationships forged with different people in some places of the world, like parts of Eastern Turkey.
You did it the hard way. You asked for permission.
Well,
wow.
Yeah, we want to do everything legitimately because we're working with a lot of those archaeologists. So instead of having something that's separate, where it's like, hey guys, can you let us go do our thing here, but we don't really care what you're doing type of thing. We actually had the complete opposite approach where we said, look, I really respect your opinion and your body of work and your research. And I would love to have you come into this and share your perspectives, but we're also going to be exploring other possible perspectives. And they, even though they respectfully disagreed with some of those perspectives, because you come at it with a friendly, collaborative type of approach, they often can see the benefits in wanting to work with people like that. For instance, a lot of these places in Eastern Turkey are very unknown by the world. Funding is a lack of funding, interest. And so I am bringing a lot of interest to these sites. And so even if they don't necessarily all agree with the direction I'm exploring, which we'll talk about what that is, I think that they appreciate a collaborative viewpoint approach that still respects the work they're doing.
Interesting. So what specific sites in Turkey were you looking at?
This all started for me when I was exploring ancient connections to Mesopotamia. The ancient story of Ziusudra, back to that story became the Christian story of Noah. Okay, but that's the original story that's very different than it eventually ended up being, has origins that are thousands of years older. It goes all the way back to ancient Mesopotamia. In fact, if you were to look at something like all the cuneiform tablets and there are thousands that have been found out of places like Nineveh and the ancient library of Ashurbanipal library, and then the Sumerians, the Akkadians, Assyrians, and Babylonians, they all wrote different versions of really important things that were going on in their world, okay? Like the most important things to them that mattered. One of them was their understanding of our origins, which is very interesting in itself. The second thing they wrote about,
understanding of our
origins? And those are the oldest writings on Earth, bar none. And we know that because paper only lasts 500 to 1,000 years at the best. Okay, and then what do you have, like cave paintings?
And these are all written and carved into stone.
So what they did is they found this ingenious method to preserve a message, and we don't even do that really today.
Right.
In which they figured out if you do something on the outer part, like if you paint or draw, it'll just wipe away. Right? Same thing with paper. All those things won't survive.
Right.
So the only way to have a message survive is to indent it into clay or stone with writing that actually they're like wedges. And why that's important is because they go into it rather than be on the outside. And so when you bake the clay after, you then get tablets. And they can survive for up to, if not sometimes depending on the condition, over 5,000 years.
Wow.
So we're talking about, think about paper, 500 to 1,000 years, and now you have tablets that can be 5,000 years. So well over 5 times that length. That's why I put so much weight on studying cuneiform tablets, because they're the origins and older stories of mankind, bar none. And a lot of the things that come later are based on those. That's what's so impressive, is it's not like a disconnection later. It's actually a direct, seamless connection of older traditions and older things that go far back before that. And that's what initially led me there.
Can you carbon date clay?
Depending on the condition. So carbon dating is often based on the preservation of that material.
Right.
So stone, right? So Gobekli Tepe was dated because the site was buried and they found organic matter they believe was affected by the environment.
But you can't date the stone, but you can look at the organic matter and say it was minimum this age. Yeah,
you can tell when that first grew on it, right? Yeah. It doesn't even mean necessarily that structure was built then. It just means whatever that organic matter was, that's when it first, took hold.
Right.
Which we're finding there's other dating that's starting to come up, like luminescence dating and types of dating with sediment cores that we're investigating. And there's a whole other host of things that we're looking into for the dating mechanisms behind that. Do you know how this whole thing got started? The whole story and how researchers like me even began in this?
What thing?
Well, I think it'd be important that we get everybody on the same page. Okay, so history has been largely unchanged in terms of our understanding of ancient history since about the Romans, about 2,000 years. A lot of people don't know that. Is that Herodotus played a very big role with Constantine in forming what we think of as history, right? A couple people like, let's put this here, put this here, put this here. Well, what most people don't know is that has remained unchanged for well over 1,000 years. I don't mean unchanged like nothing has been added, but the old ancient story of when the Egyptians were here, when the Sumerians were here, when the Peruvian, like all that story has been around for well over 1,000 years and it hasn't changed.
What story specifically, though?
The story of us. We're going to call it the story of us, Danny. So when
Herodotus first wrote about this?
So when did civilization emerge? When did we stop? When did we go from being hunter-gatherers and nomadic to the emergence of something that defined us as a civilization? Okay. Now, that narrative has not changed. That narrative has been firmly established for a very long time. Now, there are people like me who came into this field that saw huge holes in it. Now, the first pioneer, you could call him, and he's a hero in this field, is a man named John Anthony West. Have you heard of him?
Of course, yeah.
He wrote a book called Serpent in the Sky. He was, you could really say, the prominent father of all this. Okay? He was a well-versed, very well-studied man. He lived in Egypt, and he had been pointed out by another geologist, a French geologist, over some anomalies that they saw at the Sphinx enclosure. You heard this story?
Robert Schoch?
Yes.
Okay, yeah.
So Jonathan West is friends with Dr. Robert Schoch, who's one of the most famous geologists in the world. He's a PhD geologist. That is a big deal because up until that point, no PhD or accredited high-level academic had ever challenged the narrative. It was like untouchable, okay? Well, in the early 90s, Jonathan West brought Robert Schoch over to the Sphinx enclosure to date and look at it and say, this does not look like wind erosion, which is what the traditional narrative was. That why does that matter so much? Well, during the Egyptian times, if it's wind erosion, it can be easily explained if that's the evidence for saying it was from everything was built in Egypt during the dynastic period.
Exactly, right.
Problem was that
between around 2,000 to 4,000 BC, right?
Yeah, right in there, yeah. And so the problem is, though, Robert got off his plane, took the bus to Giza. He walks in the Sphinx enclosure, and within 5 minutes, he knew
that it was water.
It took 5 minutes for an academic to disprove a long-standing thing that had become a basis for an understanding of timelines of the Egyptians and when things were built. It was like all based on that.
So did he, when you say he disproved that, has Egyptology by and large accepted that?
No.
So they okay.
Yeah, it's really unfortunate. So what happened is he goes, he sees 100% it's water erosion. He's well studied in that area. A lot of other, I won't say academics, other, we'll say studied researchers agree with him.
Okay.
But mainstream doesn't.
Does not.
They're like, they won't budge on it. Okay, so that's the first crack. I believe that's the first crack. Anybody can correct me if I'm wrong. But that was the first top-level academic that came in that started challenging the narrative, saying, look, during the dynastic Egyptians, it didn't rain at all. So how can you have extensive water erosion on the Sphinx enclosure if during that time period there was no rain? Sorry, like they're scratching their heads, like they have no way to explain it, except for if you go back a lot further than that, and like when did ancient Egypt get rain? And that's where things
plush rainforest.
Well,
right?
It doesn't have to be a rainforest, but it needs to be enough rain to be able to create erosion.
Sure.
That could just be seasonal thunderstorms. But the point is, it opened up the first hole. And when I was getting into this when I was younger, Robert was like a hero of mine and still is. And I was studying it and I was seeing like, wow. So not only that, but a lot of other things are starting to come up that are significantly challenging that entire narrative, like the entire narrative of who we are, how far back we go, how we got started. Why does that matter so much? Because those civilizations that emerged around the time of the Egyptians and the Akkadians and Sumerians, they were all war empires, all of them. They were all fighting and they were all war empires.
Yes.
And then after that, it was just empire after empire, like the Ottoman Empire, the Roman Empire, and then on and on and on. The point is, Danny, that ended up defining our story. You look back at history and about even understanding mankind and who we are and like what consciousness is and what we once were, they look back and say, no, look, we were hunter and gatherers that were just hunting animals and kind of fighting each other. And then we emerged as civilizations fighting each other. You see, the problem here is that this entire chapter that I'm exploring, that we're about to go into, they show no signs of war at all.
Did you know 1 out of 8 Americans is currently prescribed anti-anxiety meds? This is why the Amanita muscaria mushroom has been growing in popularity, mainly because of its ability to ease anxiety. Even better, it's non-addictive and it activates the same GABA receptors as benzodiazepines and alcohol, making Amanita muscaria a great natural way to help taper dependency. Stress and anxiety make it easy to slip back into addiction, and that's why thousands are turning to Amanita muscaria from Minnesota Nice. It's not a magic bullet. Full recovery still needs community and support. Its founder, Christian Rasmussen, used Amanita to overcome his own withdrawal and built Minnesota Nice to make natural healing accessible and affordable. Their capsules kick in within an hour and last 6 to 8 hours and cost a fraction of pharmaceuticals. They sent me a ton of Amanita and Blue Lotus gummies, and I'm already all out of the Amanita because of the amazing relaxing state it puts me in. It really helps calm anxiety and put me in a better mood. Imagine sitting in a room with a bunch of screaming children and a giant mess and not getting triggered. It makes dealing with terrible 2-year-olds far more tolerable. It's amazing. Plus, they give back, like donating $12,000 to the Fungi Foundation and leading new research with brain mechanics. Minnesota Nice wants to help you find harmony. Head on over to mnniceethno.com/DJ and use the code DJ22 for 22% off your first order. That's mnniceethno.com/DJ and use the code DJ22. It's linked down below. Now back to the show.
Well, isn't there also something weird in the DNA of human beings compared to the DNA of apes and chimpanzees, where there's a specific part of it missing?
It has to do with the chromosomes.
Yeah.
So
right.
all primates on Earth have 48 chromosomes. Okay. All primates, all apes, except humans have 46. We're the only mammal that's in that category, if you want to call it, that it's missing 2 chromosomes, or one that's combined with 2. But we're missing like this chunk of our DNA, and nobody knows how to explain it, which is why we seem so vastly different than the ape world, because we are. We are actually a lot more different than we have similarities in common.
Yeah, it seems like the leap between apes and humans is insane.
It's huge. And they're going to say, well, no, look, we share this percentage of DNA with a cow, but that percentage, even though it's small, contains like everything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and like I've never heard any conventional explanation for this that makes sense to me. You know, it seems to me like the most, I wouldn't say plausible, but it seems like there's been some tinkering. You know what I mean? Like somebody came down and said, you know, we're going to manipulate these fucking monkeys a little bit, make their brains way bigger and make them way smarter, and then, you know, like how else do you explain the massive gap between like the brain size with us and the apes?
But that's exactly what the tablets talk about, is they talk about that entire creation of us and how we were part of something that was like a plan. And that's where, again, you want to know the answers to all these things. Yes, you can study more modern esoteric texts, and I love studying Hermeticism and others. But if you want to get to the heart of the details of our story and where we came from, you got to read the tablets, right? Like,
Can you read this?
I know the best translators that have done it.
Okay.
I am not a Assyriologist. I want to be very clear. However, what I have done is a lot of homework to make sure that I know who the best translators in history were, and I've cross-referenced every version of those tablets to find the ones that are basically more genuine. And I say that because if someone was to just want to go look up an ancient tablet, like let's say the Enuma Elish,
sure,
okay, they may pull up a Babylonian version and not even know it, and then be reading about how mankind is created by like
Babylonian version.
Yeah. So what we look at, if we were to like look at a timeline, okay, let's say this is a timeline. This is really, really ancient. This is more recent. You have the whole Sumerian epic, which is what we can get into and talk about, that I think was completely separate from the Akkadian, Assyrians, and Babylonians. They're like separate time periods, okay? And the Babylonians also recorded and re-recorded the stories that were older than them, but they altered them a little bit based on their patron god.
Yes.
And so what I mean is, when you cross-reference all of them, and this is what I've done, is you go back and you could find the origins of when something was like its most pure form, right? It's like the telephone game where
of course,
by the time you get to the end of the circle, it's something really goofy,
and
right?
even today, you have people that translate multiple texts in multiple languages that come up with different translations and meanings for things. And you even have dictionaries online that are completely divorced from each other, depending on somebody's belief system.
Yeah.
Like there's a Mormon dictionary. There's like a Greek dictionary. There's like a Christian dictionary. Like depending on what sort of religion or what your bent is, you can find different meanings for different words. And that's why people all over the spectrum have different theories of what was going on back then.
That's why this area is so finite and important, because if you don't know who those translators are, you don't know the versions you're looking at, you're not really going to necessarily be seeing what you're supposed to be seeing. And so that's what I spent decades of my life doing, was really focusing on studying every single tablet, cross-referencing every city mentioned, every association that's important as part of understanding the stories, because there is a lot of allegorical things in it. It's not all like literal.
Right.
So separating what is literal from symbolic and allegorical is not easy. But that's where I started getting really curious, because here we have these stories that are supposed to just be myths and allegories. They're not real, and yet real cities are mentioned. Real rulers are mentioned, real events are mentioned. And so when I was cross-referencing all of them, I started to put them all together and recreate the timeline of this ancient world and what happened to them, what they experienced, what they said about where we came from, like who we are. And as that unfolded, it led me to Lake Vaughn, and then opened up this entire rabbit hole, because I had already been studying megaliths and this type of work around the world, not monoliths like Stonehenge, highly precise megaliths, like for instance, the Valley Temple in Egypt, or Ollantaytambo, or Sacsayhuaman in Peru, or Pumapunku in Bolivia, or where you have very large or often very well cut stones, very, very beautifully done, usually a very hard type of stone, not something soft. And it often has a type of architecture that either only follows two forms, and there's only two. There's either the very, very 90-degree angle kind of sharp look, and then there's the really polygonal natural look like we see in, for instance, Sacsayhuaman, where it's like big pillow. I'm sure you've seen that.
Oh my God, it's
the
crazy.
Huge pillow stones.
And how they all magically fit together, mold together.
Right.
It's like you took hot rocks and just squished them together.
Exactly. And that's what we're investigating, is also how those things could have even been done. But the point is that when I was studying all of those around the world and looking at the symbols, they sometimes had symbols, and other times it was just a signature of stonework, I found what I believed was the most important key of all, which is why I'm calling the documentary The Missing Key and my book The Missing Key, is that I believe that Lake Vaughn is the origin of all of it.
What's Lake Vaughn?
Lake Vaughn is a lake in eastern Turkey. And again, this is the new kid in the block when it comes to ancient history and archaeology, right? You mentioned Turkey and everyone's like, oh, Gobekli Tepe and Karahan over and over and over again. But these areas are, to me, far more sophisticated, far more advanced, and just unknown, which is very strange. And they're a lot newer. I think part of the problem with these sites compared to Gobekli Tepe was found, before around 1940s. It's been around a long time.
Right.
Whereas, for instance, those underwater ruins that we're about to talk about under Lake Vaughn, they weren't found until 2017.
Wow.
So that's a big reason why a lot of these things are not known, is because we're breaking new ground.
So this Lake Vaughn is in Turkey.
It's in far eastern Turkey, yeah.
And there was underwater ruins found in 8 years ago.
That's it. And so that person in the background, his name is Tosin Jalen. He's a famous diver and videographer. He goes all over the world. He's in like 200 documentaries. He's pretty well known. He was diving in Lake Vaughn off of a town called the Gigives in the northern part of Lake Vaughn. He wasn't looking for ruins. He was filming underwater, these microbiolites, they're called. They're like a type of carbon formation that forms in the lake.
Okay.
Lake Vaughn's a very special lake. It's what's called it's the largest soda lake in the world.
Soda.
Meaning that it's a very alkaline, salty lake, and it has no outlet. So soda has to do with a lake that has no river or water exiting. So it all gets trapped in the lake.
Interesting.
Which form these really large, what they're called microbiolite formations. And so he was down there filming them because he's like a nature photographer, videographer.
Yeah.
And he accidentally stumbled upon what became now considered the deepest confirmed underwater ruins in the world. Again, you're going to throw out on Yonaguni or something, that's not confirmed. In fact,
what's that?
Well, Robert Schoch, way back when Graham was doing his documentary, brought him out to Japan to do the diving off of Japan to look at what he thought was underwater ruins. And
Is this what they were showing with the Flint Dibble debate where he was showing the pictures?
Yeah,
Okay,
maybe.
okay.
And then Robert Schoch determined it was a natural formation.
Okay.
And then it created a bunch of chaos. But
Yeah.
the point is
it was
that-
hard to just figure out. I mean, it was like a coin flip whether it was natural or whether it was man-made.
But the point is that there are people that say there's certain ruins here or whatever, but these are the deepest underwater confirmed.
That's clearly bricks.
These are stones that are likely
Stones, right.
andesite. It's a very hard type of stone. Now that ruin you're seeing right there, they're actually scattered over quite a large area. They're as shallow as 30 feet and they're as deep as 75 feet. 75 feet underwater. Like, it's an enormous amount of water. That was one of the big things that led me to this region, was exploring those ruins. And we for the documentary, we actually dove down. I drove down and got a chance to see them and swim down and see them for myself.
Wow.
Because they have
Terrible visibility down there, huh?
yeah, thank you
That's
for pulling that up.
because it's so salty, right?
Yeah, that's an Armenian one though. If you go back, careful, there's Armenian and non-Armenian. Yeah, go to that left image right in the middle left, that one. Click that for me. Okay, actually not that one, I'm sorry. Scroll down a little bit. I should have sent that one. What I want to show you is the front capstone of this has symbols on it. They were really mysterious that match like ancient Egypt. And so that was what's so exciting about it. And see if he has it. I mean, I should have sent that one to him, but oh, good. Can you go to the photos I sent you? The picture of me diving has it. So it's if you go up. Is it this one? Yeah, that one. Okay, we got it. Okay, there you go.
Okay.
So on what you see in front of you are two symbols. The third one is worn off, unfortunately. Now the middle symbol is a 6-petaled flower of life like symbol. Mm-hmm. And the one on the next to it is a counterclockwise spiral. Okay. Now, number one, this is deep underwater, and then it brings up all the questions of when was it built, what could have caused it to flood and be underwater, right? Which is what a lot of the dating that we're going to talk about comes from, that I came up with. And then the bigger questions are, why is that symbol also at Ionis, which we'll talk about, at Kefkalesi, and then across the world in Egypt at the Osirion. And then other places as well, is like there's a giant puzzle here that we're putting together. A global lost civilization that seemed to be sharing knowledge all around the world, all had connections to it, and they were systematically destroyed and wiped out. And we have ample evidence showing that occurred during what was called the Older and Younger Dryas, which was during the end of the Pleistocene, the beginning of the Holocene, when the last ice age ended. And what we're being falsely told by scientists is that, number one, and these are unfortunate, but science has some real things it needs to get past. The first thing is not everything is linear. It's not. Not everything is a slow linear progression. Not everything's gradual.
Right.
Not everything happens slowly. It just doesn't. We look at ice core samples from Antarctica and Greenland, it's right there. And that's why when people are talking about how warm it is right now and all these things, I'm like, what are you guys talking about? Go look at a Greenland ice core and see how much warmer it was when it spiked during the older Dryas.
Wasn't it much warmer than it is now during like the Renaissance period?
Yeah, it's that too. And so what the point is that when I go back and looked and started studying climatology and ice cores and others, you see that the Earth has gone through very violent and very apocalyptic, almost cyclical events where it's on like a repetition. And that's why the Earth goes into ice ages and then retreats, and then it happens over and over again because there's a cyclical nature to the Earth going through those. And the problem is that when it goes from an ice age to a non-glaciated period, usually it comes with crazy disasters. And we've never experienced anything like that in the last 11,500 years.
It's the holiday season, which means it's time to find new, creative ways to hide your thinning hairline from your extended family. We know red light therapy heals and the technology exists. So iRestore said, let's fix that. The iRestore Elite is clinically proven to help regrow hair using 300 lasers and 200 LEDs that send light therapy directly to your scalp. In a double-blind clinical study, nearly every participant saw an increase in hair growth with this technology. The iRestore Elite uses VIXO lasers that feature wider beams of red light wavelengths that reactivates dormant follicles to restore your natural hair. And the LEDs provide broader uniform coverage to fill in the gaps. And it all comes with a money-back guarantee. It's comfortable, it's lightweight, I feel badass when I'm wearing it. Everybody wants to know all about how it works and they want to borrow it from me all the time. And I've talked about red light therapy ad nauseum on this podcast before, so I'm confident that this stuff works. For maximum effect, bundle with the Revive Plus Max Growth Kit and Biotin Gummies, which works with the red light wavelengths. Holidays mean get-togethers, photos, and wanting to look and feel your best. And iRestore is here to help with huge Black Friday savings happening all month long. And with the code Danny Jones at iRestore.com, you can unlock exclusive discounts on the iRestore Elite. That's code DANNYJONES at iRestore.com. Please support the show and tell them we sent you. It's linked down below. Now back to the show.
Yeah, there was a big news publication who posted something about this, about the history of like the warming and the cooling of the Earth. I want to say it was maybe Wall Street Journal or maybe the New York Post or something like that. Steve, I don't know if you can find it, but there was and this was like probably in the last 2 to 3 years.
I think I saw that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was wild. They were showing like the spikes and the drops where it was going down like throughout.
That's not good for the agenda though, you know.
Exactly. That was the point of it, which
yeah.
was crazy that a mainstream publication published something like that, you know.
Well, that's what we're seeing is that the Earth has been a lot more violent than we've often been told. Mm-hmm. And that, I'll give you another example. The last ice age, when it ended, we're taught today that the explanation for so many megafauna dying, you know, like large animals like woolly mammoths and such, the explanation we're given for why they died. And by the way, like my good friend Randall Carlson, we have good conversations around this. 44 million megafauna died during that event. 44 million in the Northern Hemisphere.
In North America, right?
Northern Hemisphere, because that's where it was the hardest hit. Now, we're told that indigenous groups overhunted these megafauna, and that's what led to their extinction. Completely backwards, completely wrong. In fact, the opposite is true. Indigenous people were very respectful of populations. They would never overhunt. But the more important part to take away is
Steve, this was a recent article published in one of the websites, like it was either New York Post or Wall Street Journal, something like that.
What we found, though, across the Northern Hemisphere, Northern Alaska, Northern Canada, and other places, like especially Siberia, are massive boneyards, massive events where all these mammoths all instantly died.
Right.
And so what we're finding, especially in the areas called the New Siberian Islands, in the early 1900s, they went up and explored and were mapping them out. And they found entire mammoths that had been flash frozen with not only undigested food in their stomachs, but actually in their throats.
Yeah, wasn't that how they came up with the term Younger Dryas? Because it had the driest flower?
The flowers from that time period. What gets wild, though, is that, so the frozen company, Birdseye, really funny, like, right, of all things, how random is that? Birdseye, way back in the day, was doing some studies because they freeze things. And so they were doing a study on how cold it would have had to have been to freeze a mammoth, right? It was so funny, like a frozen food company. They determined it had to have been at least negative 150 degrees.
Whoa.
Instantly to freeze a mammoth like that. I mean, they're the hardiest animal on the earth. Now, here's where it gets really wild.
To flash freeze
a mammoth. Here's where it gets really wild, is that during the older Dryas in ice cores from Greenland, you can see this huge spike at 14,500 years ago, like warmer than now, okay? Crazy huge spike before all this chaos happened right after. A spike in temperatures that's like abnormal, and it only lasted for maybe a year or two, or like even that. So when Edward Toll, the explorer, went up to New Siberians and found the frozen mammoths, it wasn't the only thing he found. He found a 30-foot tall alder tree that was hundreds of miles north of where any trees can grow, okay? Like out of place. Not only that, it was flash frozen like the mammoths with green leaves. Green leaves. It wasn't like a seasonal climate, like seasons came in and shifted. It was in the middle of summer.
So how
And the
does
tree froze with green leaves and the mammoths froze. In the middle of summer, it means that this event caused the temperatures up in the north to drop as low as negative 150 degrees, like instantly.
how does that, I mean, like I understand if comets hit, it's going to black out the sun and the atmosphere and it's going to cause it to get very cold quickly. But how do you explain like instantaneously going to negative 100 degrees?
Have you ever seen, let's see, I was going to bring up a movie here, but okay. If you get severe interactions from the sun, and so there's a lot of people in my field that are cosmic impact theorists. I'm not one of them. I'm in the camp of Dr. Robert Schoch that instead of an impact, it's more of like a giant CME event.
Solar mass ejection.
Massive charged particle event that bombards the Earth and causes the magnetosphere of the whole planet to become weakened, and then the poles all shift. Okay? When the poles all shift, you get a weakening of that electromagnetic grid that protects the Earth, and holes open up. Now, those holes can have a couple interesting effects. One of them is that if those charged particles get through one of those holes, they can like fry the Earth. And so when we were at Kefkalesi in the Vaughan region, that was actually probably the primary reason Robert decided to join the exploration investigation of what we were doing, is that I was like, Robert, I'm pretty sure from my understanding of geology that these blocks, beautiful basalt cut blocks, have vitrification on them. And I showed him pictures of meaning melted stone. And so I showed him pictures. He came out and we hiked up to this mountain temple. It's so beautiful, called Kefkalesi. And there's a massive megalith. It's about 50 tons. It's huge. It's like 4 feet by 4 feet. It's enormous. And the sides have all broken off, and the top still has a beautiful smooth area where they cut it, however they did that. On the top of this block, the whole front of it and these bubbles is we can see where the basalt, which is one of the hardest stones on Earth, it's a volcanic stone, is melted, turned into glass. So it has glass on the top of it, and he came and identified it as it is 100% vitrification. Now, in order to get basalt to melt, you'd have to have temperatures to, what do you think?
To get basalt to
Just
melt?
to get stone to melt, like quartz or basalt or anything that's got a high...
1,000 degrees?
Nearly 2,000 degrees.
Wow.
So on the surface. So like we're complaining about, Death Valley getting like 140. How about 2,000? So you would vaporize. So if Danny Jones was hanging out at one of those sites,
Well, that'd be like a lightning strike, right?
you would just poof, you just kind of disappear. And that's what's so fascinating is then, okay, so it's vitrification. It's on a stone that's already been cut. So we know the stone predated that event because it has cuts on it and it's beautiful. But it means that whenever that had vitrification, it had to have been an extreme event. So that's the point, is you don't just get vitrification from like everyday thunderstorms or regular events.
Right.
Vitrification has to come from an extreme event,
Right.
like something that is affecting like the whole poles of the Earth and opening up holes. And the reason why these ancient sites are so targeted, because you don't just see vitrification like all over the place, it's because they were only using stones that were highly magnetic in most cases, like they were like lightning rods. So when you have these events come through, they end up focusing on these places because they're highly magnetic. And so they basically attract electromagnetism and all these things. And and that's what's really fascinating, Danny, is that we saw at nearby sites, not just Kefkalesi, but Shavus Tepe next to it, that the actual original stone formations, the temples that were there, literally exploded. We found fragments that were scattered over like an arc.
Serapeum boxes exploded too. Some of the Serapeum boxes in Egypt.
Yes,
Looks
that's
like
a
they
great
were
example.
explosions.
In the Serapeum in Egypt, there's these giant granite boxes, and the same thing happened there. Like it was an overload of energy. And that these areas were like specifically ended up getting that overload because the upper Susi temple at Shavus Tepe, there's nothing left of it. But what you find are an arc in a very specific, you can like measure it even, like an arc where everything blew and flew towards. And there are all these blocks, and there are all the beautiful cuts that were once in the temple, but they're all broken. Right. All of them all broken into pieces, like hundreds of them, like they exploded, like the whole thing exploded.
Right. Yeah. What is your take on those Serapeum boxes? What do you think they were used for?
I mean, maybe it's some kind of like maybe it's some kind of rejuvenation chamber or something. Honestly, they certainly weren't tombs.
No,
to tell you that.
No,
this civilization that built all of those is, first of all, that's not the dynastic Egyptians at all. The dynastic Egyptians were graffiti artists that came later and found a bunch of things and were really disrespectful. The fact that they recarved the Sphinx to be a pharaoh's head is one of the most disrespectful things that any ancient culture has ever done.
The one that blew my mind the most was when we had Adam Young and that guy Carolee on here the other day, and they were showing me one that I have never seen before. One of those boxes that is like the most precise box, like even more precise than the ones in the Serapeum. I forget what it was called, but Steve, if you go to my Instagram page, it's like at the top post where they show it, because I want to make sure I get this right. But what Chris Dunn was saying was,
I know Chris Dunn.
He was saying that he thinks that those boxes were used to like grow some type of crystals or something.
Interesting.
He thinks they were some sort of like battery. I don't know.
I think that's entirely possible. The battery thing might be
click on that.
Might be legit.
Click on it. Get the audio. Holy shit!
This is a granite room.
So this room's doing just fine. Doesn't need any.
How have I never seen this before?
Splinter Speedtree said probably this is the most precise artifact ever came out of Egypt.
It's a perfectly polished, rectangular granite box with looks like it was cut with a laser, dude.
And the bottom has an angle, a constant angle.
But if we back up, freeze it so we can see that. But the top,
holy cow!
The top surface was published. Petrie measured and published it, and he found it to be 0.004 of an inch deviation across about 1.25 meters, which is I think 20 times flatter than a normal household countertop.
And this entire room is also made
20 times flatter than a normal household granite countertop.
We're talking about a civilization that had tools and abilities and understandings that we still struggle with today. This civilization that built all of these things, the highly developed stuff, not the adobe mud brick, not the limestone, no. Only, and this is the thing that's interesting, so if you were to look at stone on the Mohs hardness scale, right? Diamond's 10, hardest. Mm-hmm. One would be like a calcite or a mica. The stones they were really interested in were all extremely hard. But not only that, they're highly mineralized, either with quartz, like with granites, like we see in Egypt, or in igneous terms, like igneous stones, basalt and andesite, highly mineralized with a lot of magnetism and quartz as well. It was like they didn't care where they were. It didn't matter if the stone was 500 miles away. It didn't matter if it was 1,000 miles away. This civilization didn't care about that. They cared about specifically acquiring it for very specific reasons. Mm-hmm. For its electromagnetic properties, its energetic properties on different levels that we don't seem to really get fully today. And they would go to whatever length it took to find it. And it didn't really matter to them. Like, for instance, at Ionis, there's a type of, the floor is made out of this beautiful golden calcite alabaster. It's gorgeous. And Egypt is the only slight comparison that has anything like it. But this golden calcite alabaster, when I was doing research on it, and I was looking at anywhere in that region where it could be found, I determined that the nearest source was like over 1,000 miles away. And so it's like mystifying to try to consider. We have no idea how they cut them, these stones, and we have no idea how they moved them. We're talking some of them...
Those copper tools and pounding stones.
Right. Some of them were in excess of 1,000 tons. We have no idea how they seamlessly created beautiful symbols and never made a mistake, how they would cut between blocks. We have no idea how they were able to drill perfect holes. It's like, I'll give you an example, like the Aswan Quarry, right?
Yeah.
In Aswan, Egypt. You've seen where they have, they're taking out host rock to build obelisks and different things. Have you seen the scoop marks?
Yeah. It's
what
insane.
kind of technology could have scooped one of the hardest stones in the world
Underneath
out of a host rock?
Right, that 1,000-ton obelisk that they haven't finished, the unfinished one, has all those scoop marks underneath it. How are you scooping?
How do you scoop in granite?
They absolutely were using some sort of, I think maybe chemical or something to soften it, or doing
heat.
something, or heat.
Which is what we're exploring. Actually, is the idea that maybe plasma was involved, which is really interesting.
Plasma.
Yes, and so let me add something to this. I think people will find fascinating because you just brought up the unfinished obelisk in Egypt. Okay, that was by far the largest obelisk that they had ever created. Okay, more than double the size of the biggest one.
Right.
Meanwhile, in Easter Island, the largest moai ever that was being created, like 2 to 3 times bigger than any of the moai that are there, was being taken out of the host rock, just like in Egypt.
But that was volcanic rock.
Well, they're both hard, but both of them were being taken out of the host rock, and then everything stopped. Meanwhile, you go across the world to China. You go to a place called Yangshan Quarry in China, and they were in the middle of taking out the largest blocks in human history. Some of them weighed well over 1,000 tons. Meanwhile, you add one more, Baalbek, Lebanon.
Oh yeah.
And the quarries there, they were taking out the largest that they'd ever done, and they never made it out of the quarry. What you have in common with all of these locations from everywhere around the world is that the civilization was in the midst of creating the largest that they had ever created of these structures, which means that they're at the height of their civilization because they were taking on the biggest projects they'd ever done globally. Everyone was. And then all of a sudden the work stopped out of nowhere and they just vanished. That tells us a few things. It tells us, one, they probably were caught off guard somewhat, or they wouldn't be taking on massive projects right before they're about to be destroyed. And two, the scope of these events must have been so severe that most of them must have perished. And that whoever survived must have gone to places like these massive underground cities like Derinkuyu and Kaymakli. I'm not sure you're familiar with, but you're not. In southern Turkey are the largest underground cities in the world. Some of them go down like
I've heard
half
of
a mile to
Derinkuyu.
Yeah, it has a sister city called Kaymakli.
Okay.
The wild thing is that they built these cities to be so survivable without ever having to go to the surface that Kaymakli is 5.5 miles away from Derinkuyu, okay? 5.5 miles, that's a long way. And yet, at the bottom of Derinkuyu, all the way down the lowermost level, they found a tunnel, like a corridor that goes 5.5 miles all the way to Kaymakli. Like the people there that were trying to survive couldn't go to the surface. And they were like going to go visit another city with maybe relatives, and so they would have to travel underground. Wow. I'm not sure a lot of people don't know about that. And to this day, we have no idea who built those cities. There's things thrown around based on occupations of people at different times, but we still have no idea who built them. And the amount of levels of Derinkuyu is astounding. The amount of rock they would have had to remove. We've never even found any of the stuff they removed.
When did we discover Derinkuyu? Do you know?
Derinkuyu is I think in the 1940s, and it was actually totally accidental. It's a funny story. There was a man that had his house. It was an old city, and he had an apartment, and it was like a mud brick apartment, whatever. And he had chickens, and he couldn't figure out why his chickens kept disappearing. Okay. It's funny. That's the story. And so he's like, what is going on? Where are my chickens? And so one day he followed one of them and he saw it go through like a hole in the wall. And so he took down the hole and it opened up and it turned out it was an entrance to the largest underground city in the world.
Jesus, could you imagine?
It was right, like you're in the basement
you
of
have
his
an
house.
underground city connected to the bottom of your house.
So
wow. I'll go to the top right one,
Yeah.
Steve, the Facebook one. So is this like a diagram of how deep it is?
Yes.
It's like an ant city. It's
Exactly.
like underneath an ant pile, what you would see.
And that's just Derinkuyu. That's Kaymakli is just like that.
And
But
it can fit thousands of folks.
up to 20,000 per place. And it's not only just what it seems with just random shafts, it's actually an entire world. They had libraries, they had areas for animals, they had areas for sleeping, they had schools, they had air shafts. to bring down air.
Right. I was gonna say, like, how the hell do they have oxygen down there?
They had a type of air shaft that went on an angle.
Wow, is that really it?
Yeah.
Holy crap! It's all lit up and everything.
Well, they put lights in. I mean, they weren't.
No, I
lights
know.
when they
Obviously,
found it.
after they did that, but it's amazing that they actually went to this extent to like make it like inhabitable and like so you can show people.
So they carved these air shafts enormous distances to the top on an angle so that rainwater couldn't like flood them down there, and they would live. They would live for enormous amounts of time. And my theory that many other also support is that these were created solely because of the cyclical nature of these events and how these civilizations remembered their ancestors had been wiped out, and they built these entirely for their own survival.
So how would this survive a flood, though?
How would it flood? What do you mean?
How would you survive a flood if it's underwater?
They have these giant circular stones that they just roll and seal them underground.
And it's watertight, even if there's like massive catastrophic flooding.
Yeah, have you seen the big round stones?
No.
Oh, they're amazing. So if you look up Derinkuyu and round door stones,
But then you're
check it
also
out.
cutting off the oxygen. So
No,
like,
they have air shafts.
so like snorkels.
They have air shafts that are cut up into high points, like high points that come out. There you go right there. So do the one that's the one that's next to it. But that gives you an idea of they would roll those across and seal everybody in.
And that would be watertight.
It's as watertight as they could. But here's the wild thing is, Danny, is that what if based on how long these events went on, like the older Dryas into the younger Dryas had series of events that occurred for over 1,500 years.
Right.
The entire human story.
What is the older Dryas?
The older Dryas is the events that occurred right before the younger Dryas, and they're not
Before
often,
the younger Dryas.
Yeah, they're not often talked about. But the younger Dryas is more like 12,000 years ago.
Yeah.
The older Dryas is like 14,500 years ago. Not that much further, but they have direct connections to each other. If you're going to understand the younger Dryas, you can unless you understand the older Dryas.
So my understanding is that the younger Dryas lasted for about 1,000 years.
And then the older Dryas is another 1,000. Okay. So if you combine the two, you get events, not all the time, but you get events, usually always on the front and on the front side and the back side, and then usually something in the middle. And so imagine our Earth going through catastrophic periods where certain parts of the Earth is like you can't even live there. Not everywhere, or life would all have died.
Right.
But certain parts of the Earth were just violent and difficult to even live in. Imagine them going down there. Imagine entire generations never seeing the sun, never even coming out. As far as we know, like the people that went down there and lived there, they may have never surfaced.
They would evolve into gray aliens with big eyes,
something weird like
skin,
mole people, right?
No muscles. On
No,
the body.
like they can't see, they're blind.
They would
and
develop telepathy,
right? No, I know. So, but there you go. That's like some good analysis. You can look at some of these events to see that. That's
it's
not my
backwards. So
it's not my favorite graph, but
10,000,
there's some different versions of it we can look at. But yeah. So we're talking about disasters that were enough to wipe out an entire global civilization, and then the survivors were the indigenous people, which is why they had no idea how to mimic and replicate what the ancestors did.
Yeah. It's interesting, the stories, the Sumerian stories of like Enki.
Yes.
And the connection to Prometheus and Quetzalcoatl, and how that story has just been copied for so long into different contexts, into different cultures.
Because it was real.
You know, the story of the adversary.
Yes.
Going against the gods.
Yeah.
And going against the structure or the system and trying to break it apart and to give and trying to save humanity, right?
Yes.
And it's funny that it's interesting that Prometheus is synonymous with the devil or with Satan, the adversary, yet he's the one who tried to save humanity from Zeus.
It's the same as the Adam and Eve story with the snake. It's the exact same thing. The snake in Adam and Eve is Enki. It's the same parallel to all of those stories. Is the idea that that this figure of Enki, who is, if you want to go to Norse mythology's Loki, in my equivalent, who's a trickster, that's his whole nature. He's a knowledge He's a knowledge bringer, preserver, and he is the preserver of mankind and our seed of life. And so he is shown numerous times, especially the most important one being the Epic of Gilgamesh and Atrahasis, where he is there's a pact. I don't know if you know this. So in the tablets, the great Anuna, they're supposedly the gods who determine our fates and determine everything here. Okay, and we could talk about who they are, but they create a pact where nobody's supposed to warn mankind, and they're going to create a calamity to destroy them and reset everything. That story comes from the earliest version of that is the Atrahasis, and then the Epic of Gilgamesh came later. But that's what that story is based on. And so they want to wipe out humanity. They say that we're being too loud. That's what Enlil complains, that we're too loud and that we should be wiped out. I don't know if that has to do with language or what it does, but Enki warns the Noah figure, his name was Ziusudra, an ancient sage, priest, king, of a disaster, a flood coming in the tablets. And he warns him through a reed bed. So he doesn't break his pact. He's got an oath where he can't tell, but he tricks. He's like a trickster. He speaks through a reed bed as a way to get around actually like telling them. And then he warns him, and then they have this pivotal story that then lands up in the Ararat region, which is where Vaughn is, and that's why that whole thing then continues, because it's the extension of that entire story.
Right.
But it predates anything associated with the Hebrew or Christian traditions. It's not even, they actually turned that story into a bit of a silly story. Yeah. And it's unfortunate because it wasn't two of every kind of animal or anything. None of that says that at all. Right. It talks about how he's warned because he has a very important bloodline seed of humanity that it describes it as being like a connection back to the gods, like almost like a demigod. Right. And that he's warned because he needs the seed of mankind preserved. And that's where that whole story comes from. And it has nothing to do, again, it's in the ancient Mesopotamian version, tells us very specific information about why he had to build like a cedar craft and then seal it, because it was like the only way to survive, essentially. That whole story is firmly established in the most important Mesopotamian traditions of all.
Wow.
Yeah, and that's what I was tracing. Crazy. That's why I ended up in the Vaughn region around Ararat, is because I studying the tablets and seeing that many things were pointed towards that event actually really occurring, and that we had ancient maps that showing that that's where it had happened and it was a real event. That was why I was exploring Lake Vaughn, and then I stumbled across all of those sites that were being found and realized by studying them and finding a direct genealogy connection through ancient Armenian genealogy that the whole thing was real. It's just a lot older than we're told.
At a certain age, many people start to feel like their bodies are falling apart. Aging is inevitable. But what if it wasn't? The great news about aging that we don't know is we actually have a lot more control over the aging process than we think. Folks like David Sinclair in his book Lifespan talk about how you can slow down aging and even reverse it. As we age, we accumulate zombie cells, or old damaged cells, that linger beyond their useful life. These zombie cells infect other healthy cells, speeding up their aging process. Hair loss, wrinkles, arthritis, cancer, dementia, and so on. Scientists realize we can use the body's natural cleanup process to starve these zombie cells of energy and kill them. And that's another reason I turned to Clean Being by Verso. It has an incredible blend of ingredients that have shown to kill these zombie cells. After taking Clean Being for some time, I've noticed I have clearer skin, healthier hair, better nails. I actually can see better. It's improved my vision, believe it or not. And I don't get sick as often. Verso publishes third-party testing from each batch produced to guarantee you're getting what you pay for. So head on over to ver.so/Danny and use the coupon code Danny at checkout to save 15% off your order. Again, that's ver.so/Danny, coupon code Danny to save 15% on your entire order. It's linked down below. Now back to the show.
Wow. So these symbols that you found on that structure underneath the lake. So it was 75 feet underwater.
The ones with the symbols are 30, but there are other parts of those temples and structures that are up to 75 feet deep. It's over like a big area.
So when do you think that those temples and those structures under that water were built?
Well, that's the $1 million question. And so when I was investigating and we dove down and we were looking at them, I came across a really interesting anomaly that is a big part of the documentary and the book. I realized that in order to have a lake rise, it'd be more like 100 feet. Because if you're a civilization, you're building on the edge, you're not going to build where the water's lapping up against it.
Right.
You would never do that. You would have to have enough distance between you and the lake that you weren't worried about it flooding over or whatever. So how far is that? Well, if the ruins are up to 75 feet deep, it would have had to have meant that the lake was at least 100 feet lower. 100 feet. That's an huge variability of a water body. So when I was digging into that, looking at things like seasonal rainfall patterns and things like that, nothing could explain it.
What is the deepest part of that lake?
That lake is mysterious. And so officially it's 1,500 feet deep, but fishermen that have depth soundings that go out there claim it's far deeper than that. They claim it's over 3,000 feet deep. Whoa. It's actually one of the deepest lakes in the world. It's an ancient lake.
The deepest part of the ocean is 5,000 feet. This is 3,000 feet?
They have instruments on their boats, and I've confirmed this with like the national.
Ask a AI, Steve.
No, they're going to say 1,500.
Let's see what the AI says.
They're going to say 1,500.
Okay.
But here's the thing, though. Underneath Lake Vaughn, there are active fault lines. It's a very unusual lake that has faults underneath it. It's a very volcanic, very fault-prone area. And the theory is that the area that is that depth is only is like a smaller area, and they've missed it.
Right.
Because I've talked to numerous fishermen that go out with depth soundings that go a max of 1,000 meters. They max out. They can't go any deeper. And they're claiming that they're maxing out in that lake, making it one of the deepest lakes in the world. And it's also one of the oldest lakes in the world. And
1,000 meters is how many feet?
3,000 feet.
3,000 feet?
Roughly. So it's very mysterious. It's a very ancient, very old lake. And they...
Still, 1,500 feet is deep for a lake.
Oh, it's wicked. It's very deep.
That's probably the deepest lake on Earth, right?
No, Lake Baikal is the deepest lake on Earth.
Oh, how deep's that one?
I got to pull up the stats on that, I think.
Where is it?
In Russia, southern Siberia.
Oh, Siberia. Okay, yeah, I've heard of that one. Yeah.
Yeah, that one's the deepest. Yeah, 5,000. There it is.
Whoa!
So Baikal is the deepest in the world. Yeah.
Google what is the deepest? What is the
Mariana Trench?
How deep is
ocean.
How deep is the Marianas Trench?
I think it's 20,000 feet deep or something. Look it up.
Oh, that's right. I'm thinking in the wrong the wrong measurements. Yeah. Okay.
Okay, so there you go. You're deeper. So that's why
Mariana Trench is like 7 miles
because
deep.
That's where they joke that they can put
right.
up Mount Everest in the Mariana Trench, and that you can like put it in there.
That's crazy, bro.
I know. It's like another world down there. So
it really is.
It's
less explored than the moon or Mars.
And
we've explored more of the surface of Mars than our own oceans.
Yeah, and our Earth is over 70% water.
Yes.
Like ocean, which is wild that most of the Earth is actually unexplored.
Dude, I had this NASA physicist on here a couple months ago, and he was explaining how the variation in atmospheres change across planets in our solar system. He was saying that the surface of Venus, he was like, atmospheres are so crazy and all over the place and impossible to manage. He's like the average temperature on the surface of Venus is like, what was it, 800 degrees? Between 800 and 1,000 degrees, depending on the weather. And it changes every day. Just like the weather here changes every day, right?
Yeah.
He's like, atmospheres are like impossible to manage. If you're a civilization that's hopping from planet to planet and you have that ability, he's like, it would be so difficult to go from an atmosphere like Earth or the atmosphere like Mars, which is negative 100 degrees, to an atmosphere like Venus, which is plus 800 degrees. You have 1,000 degrees variation in the temperature. You have pressure. The pressure on the surface of Venus is the same pressure as being at the bottom of Marianas Trench.
It's like hell.
With
it's
the
like
atmosphere.
A hell world.
It's like hell. And he was actually saying the coldest, there was like a cold day on Venus, which was like maybe 600 degrees. And there was bismuth and magnesium snow on the tops of the mountains.
So wild.
And he was like, that's what a cold day in hell looks like on the surface of Venus. So he's like, if you're a civilization that can travel from planet to planet, he goes, you can't deal with the variations with 1,000 degree variation, different a pressure of being 7 miles under the like the pressure's insane, the temperature's insane, you have comets, you have volcanoes, it's completely unmanageable. But if you can find planets that have liquid water on them, liquid water can only exist between 33 degrees and 212 degrees Fahrenheit. And you can go down 1 atmosphere, 33 feet, 2 atmospheres. You can go down to the depth that matches the pressure that you're used to.
Yeah.
And the temperature variation is only less than 200 degrees. So it's perfect if you can find liquid water.
I think the takeaway there is that the Earth is a very special place.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a whole nother discussion that gets along with how rare and variable our actual combination of Earth, Sun, and Moon is. So that's a whole nother conversation.
Oh, yeah.
But, very weird. The moon is so strange.
Perfect terraforming device.
Yeah, that whole thing is interesting. And actually, it's interesting that the tablets, even like the Megaliths, talk about like the formation of our solar system and things. So yeah, really, really interesting how we could be talking about beings that were here during the formation of our solar system. That's pretty wild to even consider.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a huge rabbit hole we could go down with this topic. Have you heard of the there was an element. I think it was an element. It was Xenon 222 or something like this that was found on Earth where this element can only exist if you have like, I don't know, 100 thermonuclear bombs exploding. Right, it can find out what this one is. This is one the Giorgiani told us. But there's a specific element that we found on Earth that was like, it was because it was like in the middle of like an atomic bomb testing site or something like that, and I guess it doesn't exist anywhere in the solar system, and they found it on Mars.
Well, that just shows you the kind of environment that was needed to create that, and what kind of disaster could have led to that creation based on what we see now on the planet.
Well, we have the remote viewer, those remote viewers during the Cold War who were asked to remote view Mars, and people who have talked about it, like Joe McMoneagle was one of the guys, one of the Stargate people who was tasked to remote view Mars, and he explained seeing a civilization there of like tall white Nordic beings who were trying to escape, and they were explaining that there was a catastrophe there. It looked like everything. There was giant megalithic structures that didn't look like anything he'd ever seen other than megalithic structures on Earth. Xenon 129.
Yeah.
So it was the isotope.
I know about that. John Bramer. Yeah, he was talking about how it's like a signature of
a nuclear reaction.
Well, but not just a nuclear reaction. Coronal mass ejections with charged particles that are really radioactive can, if it's an intense enough event, can give a similar type of reaction that a nuclear weapon does.
Yes. So Steve, ask ChatGPT, where have we found Xenon 129? So and Joe McMoneagle was saying, so there was not only these like ancient megalithic looking structures there, and again, this is a recount of a remote viewing, so take it with a grain of salt, what it's worth. He said that they were trying to escape because there was some sort of, and this was 1 million years ago. So he was asked to remote view Mars over 1 million years ago, right? So he's saying that these tall, white, Nordic-looking structures, or being human, they look like humans, but they were just tall. They look like Olympic swimmers, right? And they were trying to escape the planet because there was a catastrophe coming. They couldn't figure out how to get off the planet. They had explorers that had gone out to try to find another place for them to live, try to explore neighboring planets. But they said they found one, but it was too unstable. The atmosphere was too unstable. There was volcanoes, maybe dinosaurs, whatever it was. And they didn't have an answer yet to like if they could actually go there. And there's been theories that have been tested that maybe that was the reason for the moon. If we could have put a moon there to stabilize the temperature, the atmosphere, the tides, all that stuff on Earth, maybe they could have used that as a terraforming device to jump from Mars to Earth.
I think that there certainly is, and I'm not someone who's going to jump on really talking a lot about necessarily like that, the extraterrestrial influence type of concept. But I will tell you, if there's anything that suggests outside intervention, it's the moon. It's the weirdest thing in the world. Like we know of no other satellite to a planet ratio like the moon. The what its composition is, the way that it balances life here, and the size ratio for the Earth and the Sun, it's an impossibility.
Yeah, it's 1/400th the size, and it's 1/400th the distance. It's perfect to create an eclipse.
And we're told that the moon is just an accreted object that randomly formed that perfect shape that happens to be 1/400th, right? To be that perfect representation of the size to create eclipse. It's impossible that could be random. It's impossible. There's no way that all those impossibilities could come together in one thing unless something wanted to create a perfect system here.
Right.
That's what it seems like. Our solar system is some kind of an experiment in creating a perfect system with ratios and to foster something here. And I think the more that I've studied, especially looking at tablets, is that may have been all done for, a lot of it at least may have been done for us because of how important our story is and how we actually have a far more profound connection to higher things than we know.
There's a guy who, I think his name was, fact check me here, Steve, the guy named Carl Wolf, who found images. He was working in the space program, and he was developing photographs, and he went into this secure location where they were actually like developing photographs of the dark side of the moon or whatever. And this guy saw it, and he described vividly that there was megalithic structures that were on the dark side of the moon.
Yeah, I've definitely heard that.
And like, I think he was killed. He died mysteriously. He claimed he saw NASA photos of alien structures, quote unquote alien structures. He died in a bike accident. So go down to the top paragraph, see exactly what it says. Former U.S. Air Force he was a photo technician who claimed he saw the secret NASA photos of the structures on the surface of the moon. So I don't think he actually said whether he believed they were alien or not. What he said was they were megalithic looking structures on the dark side of the moon.
Yeah, and so there's a couple really weird things, and I guess Randall's really good in moon stuff, but I'll mention a couple things. One, when they did studies of there was a whole Russian team, and I don't remember if it was the 70s or 80s, but a Russian team did a study on craters on the moon. Have you heard this?
How they're all the same depth?
Yeah. And then none of them, no matter how large the radius of the crater is, none of them exceed a certain depth.
Right.
Which is so weird because
very weird.
The depth should be directly determined based on the size of the impact, right? So something's larger that creates a larger impact crater should go deeper into it.
Right.
And yet none of them do. They never go past a certain depth anywhere on the planet. They never do. And the weirdest thing is after the Apollo missions, when they sent a probe to crash into the moon, I'm sure you know about this, it rang like a bell for
over an hour.
For hours. It just rang, which tells us that it's
here's an interesting
composed
take.
of metallics and is hollow. Like, is that...
Steve, ask ChatGPT, what is the size of the moon compared to the Earth? And then ask ChatGPT, what is the mass of the moon compared to the Earth? And the variation is crazy.
Oh, it's like light. It's really, really light.
Oh,
but it's also the strongest thing ever at the same time.
Right.
So it's really weird.
Yeah. So, okay. Oh, we didn't ask for all this. Come on, ChatGPT.
But basically, it doesn't have any of the density of Earth. That's the thing that's so weird about it.
Okay, the moon is about a quarter the diameter of Earth. What is the mass? What is the
mass compared to Earth?
The mass difference of the Earth compared to the moon?
Oh wow, that was cool.
The Earth is about 81 times the mass. So the moon's mass is roughly 1.23%.
And yet it's a quarter the size.
A quarter the size.
Yes.
That means it's hollow.
Yeah, it's likely hollow. And the theories, and I mean, again, if you're going to try to figure something out, you got to go back to the old Sherlock Holmes thing, right? And it's important. It still rings true to this day. If you're trying to figure something out, you use that old method, right? Whenever you're trying to explore something, you explore all possibilities, and whatever remains, no matter how improbable, must be the truth. That holds true for anything. So we eliminate everything, right? Let's eliminate all the things that aren't there. It has a certain depth. The craters can't go past a certain depth. It rings. It's lighter. So what does that mean? What's all that's left? Well, it's not natural. It has some kind of a shield, like some kind of a metallic or something underneath the ground,
Yeah.
something to prevent anything from going deeper. And if it's a metallic-like object, it somehow is hollow too. Mm-hmm. Like that's the only thing that makes sense if,
Right.
if we analyze and look at it.
Right.
And the fact that life wouldn't be possible on Earth without it
Right.
is really interesting. Like has to be that exact ratio. What was it? That if it was even 5% in a different location, like if it was 5% further away or 5% closer, like none of this would work.
Well, the distance between the Earth and the Moon is changing. So I think, what did Kevin Knuth explain to us? I think he explained to us that the distance, the Moon every year gets a couple feet farther away from the Earth. Is that right? And has it been constantly doing that, or does it? I think maybe it resets every couple thousand years or something like this.
Well, it's tidal locked, so it's stuck to our gravity, so it can't go anywhere. But it is so weird. It's so interesting to consider whether or not something was created a long time ago to let a certain kind of story unfold.
I mean, it's a miracle. The Moon is a miracle.
It's an impossibility.
Right. It's like the Moon being, the idea that the Moon just randomly ended up being that distance from the Earth to be that distance to the sun, and being able to perfectly stabilize and terraform this Earth to make it livable is as believable as Jesus Christ. I mean, it's enough to make anyone become a Christian.
If anything, I would challenge anyone who's smart and academic to try to go look at that evidence to try to disprove that.
Right.
Like about what the Moon is, because it doesn't make sense.
So this says that the Moon moves away from the Earth at a rate of about 3.78 centimeters or 1.5 inches per year. Can you zoom out a little bit, Steve? So it says the Moon's gravity creates tidal bulges in the Earth's oceans because the Earth rotates faster than the Moon orbits. These bulges are pulled slightly ahead of the Moon. The Moon's gravity then pulls back on these bulges, and in turn, the bulges pull forward on the Moon, pushing it into a slightly wider orbit. Interesting. But does it say that? So it goes back and forth. Is that what it's saying?
It can't actually, because it would just leave if that was the case. It probably just wobbles back and forth. Based on that.
Right.
Yeah, but it's really interesting. I mean, it's
also crazy that it's fucking it's 234,000 miles away.
Yeah.
Like, that's just absurd how far away it is. But it doesn't seem that far away.
Because it still plays such an integral part in our planet with life.
Right.
Yeah. It's just weird.
Yeah.
I mean, someday, hopefully we'll know more answers on that. For me, I like to typically think, look, there's a lot to figure out still in space. We have a lot to still figure out here. Mm-hmm. Right? Especially with our story and who we are. So a lot of people are racing to try to escape. I'm more like, I think that what we need is that we most need to grow is here, not out there. Like, for instance, we are very primitive in our understanding of consciousness and higher levels of energy and spirituality in like a deep way, like they were. We're like children when it comes to that. I think that we shouldn't be blinded by the fun technologies that are put in front of us and ignore what may be a more important area to understand and go into. Like, rather than moving forward at the speed we are and thinking that there aren't consequences, I think we need to remember that we can learn a lot more about who we are and about where we should be going in the future in the past than necessarily in the future. Like, they could teach us a lot more than we understand, a lot more. And I think that's actually the biggest piece here, is that if we study this civilization, this global civilization that left all these clues for us, all this knowledge, I think it is the ultimate way we find what we've been looking for all along, not out there, here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with you. I think they were on a different trajectory than we are on now, obviously.
Very different.
They
were very earth-based technologies. So their technologies seem to be based more on manipulating elements, alchemy, understanding things like resonance fields and cymatics, and like things that we are just starting to, we still think are kind of fantasy a little bit, and we're looking at in a weird way. Like, it's an example. I think it's funny where I see it in memes a lot. I think it's hilarious where people say They're like, oh, like we know all about radio waves and microwaves and all that stuff, and yet consciousness is still like not a real concept for them.
Right.
So you can't measure something and it's non-localized. It's something that, so like you can't measure love either, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure you've felt love in your life or whatever for family or animals or people. How do you measure love?
Mm.
How do you measure it's real?
Right.
There's a lot of things that we can't measure, but they're still really important towards understanding things that we shouldn't, I think, almost like disregard because they're not super tangible. Like, for instance, if we look at ancient mysticism and esoteric traditions of going into deep meditative states and having out-of-body experiences and lighting up your chakras through your spinal cord like we see with the Caduceus symbol, like all this ancient, like almost like magic that we seem to laugh at and not think is real in most cases, and yet it may be the answers to all of, like everything.
Why do we laugh at it though? Like, why has it become such a weird stigmatized thing that normie society likes to paint as like kooky?
Because we've been conditioned that way. So our entire life and our generations before us are based on civilization emerging out of an industrial age. It's based on industrial machines and technologies that completely disconnect us from the earth. They don't bring us closer together to the universe and the earth. They disconnect us. So our entire civilization is building itself on the principles of just acquire more, grow, accumulate all the resources you can, and just be like, some kind of a conquering monster here, rather than realizing that the depth of what we really are and what we can become, they seem to have mastered. And they were able to do things that we have no idea about today.
Maybe that's why they got wiped out. They were becoming they were getting too close to the gods.
Well,
they were becoming too much like the gods.
And I would say, like, what's a more advanced culture? Us or them? I don't know if I could answer that, because it depends on what you want to call advanced. It depends on what you want to call, like, if you want to call something superior to something else. I would argue that a lot of the things that we have now are detrimental towards our understanding of something greater, because we choose to hide from it. We choose to ignore it because I think that it's scary and it's something that is unknown to the world, that they don't even believe it's real. Like, people don't believe that, like, if you were to say magic and talk about magic, people are like, oh, you're talking about like sleight of hand magic with cards and stuff? No. Like ancient esoteric mysticism magic.
Right.
Like, but they're going to laugh at that. People will like smear and make faces, and you're like, so you start to look into what these...
Magic was synonymous with religion in antiquity.
They were...
Jesus was doing magic.
Yeah.
Music and drugs.
They
and
were
ritual.
magic.
Yes.
That's the whole point, is
what
that...
the Eleusinian Mysteries was.
Exactly. So the real question we need to ask is, how much have we lost? How much have we forgotten who we really are? And how much do the things we have actually disconnect us from what matters the most? And I mean, I mean that, like, if you never ever go out into nature, you don't meditate, you don't ground yourself with any of it, you're always going to be disconnected. You'll never be connected to it, because the core of it, the first thing you must do, it's in every ancient tradition, throughout Vedic traditions and throughout Gnostic traditions, is the importance of having an understanding of the all. Having an understanding of the universe, Earth, like our roles within that, what consciousness is, what energy is. Energy can't be created or destroyed. It only changes state. So then why do we think we die? Do we really die? Mm-hmm. Or does our spirit, our consciousness live forever, eternally? Every civilization from this time period was obsessed with the afterworld, the afterlife, and the underworld. Mm-hmm. They were obsessed with it. Mm-hmm. The Egyptians used to try to map out, if someone died, they would try to map out their path of their souls and try to have them reincarnate again.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing in India.
Ancient cultures were obsessed with the idea of dying and rising gods, and it's repeated throughout history, going back thousands of years before Jesus Christ.
And yet we're conditioned into that the brain creates consciousness, and we die, and then that's it. We just go in and we never exist again. So it creates this perpetual system of fear throughout everything, and like traps people. Like it enchains them in this ideology that prevents them from seeing the higher truths of what they really are. And that's why I think the entire purpose why this entire chapter of human civilization, this lost civilization, why it's been so pushed pushed at or prevented from becoming known and suppressed in many cases. It's because if it became true, like known about them, we would fundamentally shift everything we think about who we are, everything. Like this whole world of what we created would somewhat crumble, I think.
Do you think there's knowledge that is being hidden about these people that
100%.
somebody like a group of people have that is just they're keeping it from the world?
What we see,
Or do you think that's what Zahi Hawass is doing?
no, it's not Zahi. He's
Okay.
just a gatekeeper for something higher.
Right.
So
he just seems like a guy who's prostituting himself for money and political power. And
what we saw happen all the way back to ancient Babylon and then throughout the Roman time period was this idea of controlling thoughts, controlling people's thoughts and how they view things. And it was done so as a means of control.
Even now.
Yeah, it's still being done. But back then it was even being done on another level. I think because the world we lived in, like you've seen the whole idea, like the whole Roman games thing, right? Rome was in a state of collapse and people were super unhappy. So what they did is they created games to entertain them and distract them from the greater problems of the empire. You know, like much like we sometimes do today. And it causes people to not care about asking important questions because they're just being entertained. And then that entertainment usually comes along with like a conditioning of violence.
Right.
So those things are being used, were used as a tool.
Yes.
And so what happened was secret societies used to exist all throughout history and were very important. The role of secret societies was to bridge the gap of older traditions and knowledge and carry them forward because they realized that a lot of this knowledge was just not something that the average person they really would understand or get. And so it wasn't always about necessarily like a hiding. It was originally more about what they call like like someone who's like an adept, someone who is already that kind of mindset. And so they bring them in and they would teach them and they would bring them in. They're called mystery schools. Okay, they go back all the way throughout history, these ancient mystery schools. And it was recognized very early on that the average peasant or person that lives their life, like they wouldn't understand. And they considered it something where it ended up having to be kept within certain fractals of society. And that was not done intentionally as a way to hide knowledge from everybody, but eventually it was. So eventually, those secret societies that were maintaining and protecting that knowledge, they ended up becoming really very corrupted and they used that knowledge as a form of control, as saying like we have a deep understanding of the psychology of humans and the nature of them and the nature of who we really are. And so that knowledge at first that was being guarded within certain groups then became hidden. And then the average person like couldn't even get access to it at all, even people that wanted to know.
Right.
It was only in these upper echelons. And so what happened is too much power ended up in certain groups. And then the very secret societies that were supposed to be the ones protecting ancient knowledge and being those keepers of knowledge ended up being the gatekeepers of everything. They flipped it. They ended up becoming the ones that were controlling, and their viewpoints often, and it's funny as you can get little glimpses of it during interviews and different things, is they often say that humanity are basically like sheep and they're not ready for understanding like the greater truths of everything. And so they do it as a means of protecting them, which I think is bullshit.
Yeah.
I think that whole idea of keeping us in a conditioned
relationship,
lower form of consciousness simply because they're protecting us. What really is the truth is that it's a system of creating control and keeping people in like an industrial type of mentality for working and not asking questions, which is why the Rockefeller education system in the United States that was developed by Rockefeller was developed during World War II, because it was developed as a curriculum that would create a worker just educated enough to do regular tasks, but not educated enough to like a high level to ask questions and to go into a deeper place. It's very, very cleverly designed, the Rockefeller education system, so that people are literally created into a mindset that blocks all of these things that we're talking about out. Even the idea, I'll give you an example, just a simple one, is the idea that if something is old, it has to be primitive. That is ingrained in people, ingrained. So to the point where if I show someone Ionis, I'm like, look at this andesite stonework. It's spectacular. They're like, that looks like it was just built. That's their mentality, is that instead of thinking that anything old is primitive, how about it's not linear at all, is that most of all the advanced stonework and the amazing stuff is actually the oldest, and that the primitive looking adobe and stuff came from way later because we were reset. We lost everything. We forgot, and we had to go back to starting fires and hunter-gathering again. And then when we rose back up again, we had no idea how to do any of the things that they did. No idea. And so that's where the confusion came in over other cultures building on top of much more older structures and then getting credit for building them.
I want to touch back on that Rockefeller point you made. Is that when the schools, the modern day school system was first developed?
It was the education system in the United States. So let me give you an example. If Danny Jones, you're like, okay, I want to be a teacher. The hell with this podcast thing. I'm done, right? I want to go teach, I don't know, English, right? Actually, that's not a good example. Let's say you want to teach history.
Okay.
That's better.
Perfect.
So you go in and you're like, boy, I am going to shake things up. You guys, you better look out, right? The hell with that whole Rockefeller education system. I'm going to be talking
about the Anunnaki.
We're going to talk about Anunnaki. I'm going to talk about, ancient lost civilizations and like what they were building and creating and blah, blah, blah. You will be out of a job within a week. Gone. You will be fired.
Yeah.
Why? Because if a teacher is going to become a teacher, they have a very set education curriculum you have to maintain. You have to.
Right.
So if you get like a big book and you're like, oh, memorize this whole thing and that's what you're going to teach. They can't teach about anything that's outside of the curriculum or they're literally in trouble. That's what we're talking about.
And
it's
what is
indoctrination.
what is the reason for that?
To keep us in an indoctrinated mindset in which we perceive reality in a completely artificial way that is not at all what it really is. That's the whole idea behind like the Truman Show and the Matrix and all that stuff. That's what it comes down to, is that it's a conditioned world in which we've been forced into a materialistic world that's disconnected us from all the things that really matter the most.
Steve, remember we pulled up a stat the other day about school books and college books, like the typical books that you get in school that you hand out to all the students.
Yeah.
That industry is like a multi-billion-dollar industry.
Because they own the whole thing. They can't. Nobody else can. All they
have to do is just reprint the same books forever. And now that schools are starting to transition to iPads and computers, they're actually their revenue is starting to fall off now. Finally,
but that's what we're talking about. Is a long time, and so every generation gets taught a version of reality. Everything, who we are, what consciousness is, what our history was, right? Who were we, and then everything is then based on that level of conditioning. And then what happens? Well, they have kids, then they teach their kids that, then their kids go to school. So I remember when I got out of college and I went down the rabbit hole that I did, I was like, I couldn't believe it. I felt like I had never been taught anything. Like most of it was bullshit. At least a lot of it. A lot of it was in a certain kind of viewpoint that was really hiding everything that really mattered the most to me.
Yeah.
Learning really began for me like after college.
Homeschool is starting to become more in vogue lately.
Yes, it is.
A lot of people I know
and guess what?
Homeschooling.
They don't have to follow the curriculum necessarily. Homeschooling has the option where as long as you follow certain criteria of grading and meeting certain requirements,
right,
you can be a lot more flexible when it comes to that.
Yes. Yeah. There's certain guardrails they have to stay inside. It's like to stay like accredited or whatever you want to call that. But like, what does that even mean nowadays? Like, you don't need, like, when you go to hire, most companies nowadays that are like hiring people to do high level jobs, unless it's like a doctor or a lawyer, they don't really like, I don't feel like education is that important anymore.
In fact, I would say it can often be the opposite. Let me tell you what I mean by that. I'm working with a lot of archaeologists around the world, and I will show things to them they've never seen before. They've never even, like, I've never even seen that before or even considered that. And when I talk to them about the theories and the evidence and what we're looking at, a lot of them, it's like a deer in the headlights, because when you go through an education system to get a degree, you're just regurgitating of very specific core pieces of information that you're being given. So if you want to have an archaeology degree, you're just getting good grades and you're testing and you're writing about what's already been established, and you can't challenge that narrative. You will be laughed out. If someone has an archaeological degree, they can often have more of a conditioned, controlled mindset than someone like me who doesn't.
Right.
Because I'm not bound by anything.
Right.
I'm bound by the objective study and search for truth and like going off of science, but I don't have this predetermined thing that's telling me that has to fit into something.
Right. You don't think about tenure or all these kinds of things.
Yeah, I'm just like, okay, what is the evidence? Well, it's pointing towards this. I'm going to follow it.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And that's dangerous. I'm very dangerous because I bring in to merge that academic world with the alternative world, and I bring the receipts and I bring the evidence, and I'm saying, look, we have huge holes that do not make any sense on a wide variety of areas all around this in the world. And I like what Graham Hancock says about it being a foundation of sand. Our history is been built on a foundation of sand. It will just wash away because it has no structure, it has no foundation. Once this all opens up and we'll understand this lost chapter, it will open up every door that we've ever wanted. Because they seem to have mastered all the things that matter most. Like understanding the nature of source and creation, understanding the blueprint of everything in the universe, understanding those celestial forces that maintain that, understanding our role and who we are in that, understanding how we were created and what the gifts that we have that are like them, and how we've largely been kept in a place of controlling our consciousness and controlling that inevitable truth of understanding, because the nature of reality is two things. One, it's cyclical, meaning it's never permanent, it's always changing. And two, and always returning where it's cyclical, like starting somewhere and then ending up where it began. And then two, duality and polarity are fundamental constants in the universe, meaning that if there is light, there is dark. If there is good, there is evil. And those roles are being fundamentally played, very much so, to the point where when we try to understand how our world became so dark and so war-driven and so controlled, we simply need to understand that it was an inevitable plan, I believe, as part of an understanding of, if you ever heard of that term, with great power comes great responsibility, right? You see it in all the Marvel movies. Mm-hmm. Do you really think that Danny Jones should have great powers and be able to do great things if he doesn't know how to appreciate it and uses it poorly, or doesn't have like a deep understanding of it? Do you deserve to have those things?
I don't know.
No, you don't, because you're not going to use them in the right way. It looks when you read all the tablets and you start getting into understanding who the Anunna are and how they talk about them being the ordainers of destinies and how they're like chained to our reality. And in ancient Gnosticism, through the Nag Hammadi, they're called archons, like the controllers of our reality, and how they're described as ordaining the entire destiny of us. And every event and everything that happens is actually part of like a great story.
Right.
And that the whole purpose is to allow us to be tested to see what path we ultimately take. Whether or not we're tempted with great technology and great power, whether or not we actually follow and take the right steps necessary to be able to understand something greater and deeper. I'm not interested in a bunch of fun little tech. I'm interested in understanding how an ancient civilization could have used their voice to move stones. That's what I'm interested in. How do they move 1,000-ton megaliths? Right. We're not asking the right questions. Mm-hmm. We need to start understanding that this entire civilization that we're exploring, that left all of this knowledge there for us, we're just ignoring and we're not paying attention to it. Whereas it may have the answers to everything that we're really asking, like the most important questions of all. Who are we? What is our role here? What are we supposed to be doing? Other questions like, what powers do we have? What have we forgotten? Who are we supposed to be?
Yeah.
Like the most important questions of all, they seem to have mastered all of them. And that all esoteric traditions, all teachings, whether it's Vedic teachings or teachings from Gnosticism or Hermetic teachings or the Popol Vuh and ancient Mayan teachings, or Egyptian teachings, or Mesopotamian teachings, or Tibetan teachings, Chinese teachings, Lao Tzu, they're all the same thing. They're all a giant collection of understandings of how we, as powerful beings, can follow a certain archetype and unlock a doorway.
Right.
Unlock a doorway that takes us somewhere that technology does not take us.
Well, human beings certainly have abilities.
Oh, yes, we do, for sure.
That most people aren't aware of.
Agreed.
Right. I think one of the best evidences for that is like things like the Stargate program that the military was spending lots of money on to get people to do things like remote view, astral projection. There's this guy, what's his name? The Jewish physicist who wrote about the, what are those papers called? The declassified CIA papers where they talk about consciousness and astral projection.
That's not the Adam story, is that you're talking about a different one?
And yeah, not the Adam and Eve story. Yeah, it's a different one. God damn it, why am I blanking on this?
Are you talking about gateway experience?
The gateway, the gateway experience. Yes, thank you, Steve. There's clearly been a correlation with the rise in technology and the atrophy of the psychic mind.
Yes,
and
exactly.
the atrophy of psychic abilities.
Yes.
Right. So it seems like the rise in the technical analytical mind has correlated with the atrophy of the psychic mind.
Yes.
And I think that even like, if you want to use the most extreme example of human beings before we had the written word, or before we had the technology to offload our memories onto other devices. Now we have phones, but back then we had
tablets,
things like this. Like we probably had some extraordinary abilities that are inherent in us, that are ancient, that have just been non-existent since we've been in this industrial technological world.
Longer than that too. Yeah, even longer than that. No, I 100% agree. That's the new future.
And that's why people like have you ever gone into like the Amazon rainforest or a place that's completely uninhabited, way far away from civilization, and like had that experience of like deep senses sort of like waking up in you, and like that's hearing the birds, the insects.
That's what I was trying to explain when I was talking about how we've been disconnected from what matters the most. The earth and grounding is one of the essential components that every mysticism teaching encapsulates and says basically there are these tenets that we must follow if we want to reach those higher levels. And if we don't, if we try to skip them, we won't. We'll be shut down and prevented. And again, that whole conversation of who's preventing us is another whole thing we can talk about. But the point is that if you decide to see through the illusion, you can end up becoming something far greater.
Right.
And that is, as when I was studying that civilization, all, as many esoteric teachings and mysticism as I could, I didn't just study them, right? There's the difference between having knowledge and wisdom, right? You know the difference between the two?
What is it?
Knowledge means you're aware of something. Oh, great. Wow, I know all about chakras and stuff, right? And meditating. And you asked me, have you ever meditated? I'm like, no. That's the difference between wisdom.
Right.
Wisdom is applied knowledge into your life.
Experience,
okay? Yeah. And so I went down that journey and had profound, like I can't even explain them. Like there were experiences so profound and incredible that
you can't put them into words.
No, they were like something that like people wouldn't even believe you.
Right.
And I experienced those things firsthand. And so I know what they're trying to help us with. What they're trying to help us understand is that, like you said, the things that matter the most, we have forgotten. And we are not really practicing or understanding. Like if you're being bombarded by all kinds of sensors and wireless signals and noise and all these things, it's actually really affecting you.
Yeah.
That's why when you go into
body,
nature, you go into
cells.
Nature and you're among that and you can meditate and connect, you unlock something because what you do is you ground. So the first thing is you ground to the earth. And that's important. The earth is a giant crystal. Okay.
Right.
The earth is mostly silica based. So it's a giant crystal that is very powerful. And one of the essential components for anyone that's listening to this, like the first thing you want to do if you want to go down that road, you need to spend time in nature. That's the first thing. And then understand how to quiet your mind. Understand you have to be healthy. There's a whole list of things here, right?
Yeah.
You have to drink only spring water, no more tap water. Only distilled in spring water. That's it. You can't drink anything that's got fluoride in it or anything. You have to eat healthy as possible, as organic and as natural as you possibly can. You've got to exercise. You've got to exercise your mind too. All those components. And then you go into nature, start studying esoteric mysticism traditions and what they were all trying to teach. Start to incorporate that into your archetype of who you are and watch what happens. Watch what happens.
Yeah.
It literally unlocks things you could never imagine.
Right.
That's what they were trying to leave behind.
Being inside underneath these LED light bulbs all day too is like one of the most unnatural, unhealthy things for the human mitochondria.
It affects our circadian rhythm. So it's really bad. So I would propose, if you're going to be in lights, all non-LED, salt lamps if you can, even try to go traditional and rise and fall with the sun. Like if it's really dark, maybe it's time for bed.
No screens.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
No, I mean, seriously.
No, for sure.
Like,
that's one of the best things you can do for your health.
It's so interesting, even components like getting a lot of sleep. Without things that are distracting and getting a good night's sleep. And when you incorporate all those things, something unlocks.
I mean, you see what happens to orcas when they're in tanks at SeaWorld for their whole lives, right? Their fins start to flop over. They become mentally unstable.
They look horrible.
They attack humans. Yeah. They look terrible. I mean, that's what is happening to human beings that sit inside an office in a cubicle all day.
Exactly.
Underneath LED lights.
We are in an artificial system in a place that we don't belong, which is why all of this has gone the way it has, which is why that civilization that we're exploring, the lost civilization, is so dangerous because they mastered the human experience and the God code. They mastered it all. They were literally, I don't know, having astral projection journeys, and I think they were able to take their consciousness and go anywhere they wanted. They were doing things in these temples and things in these pyramids that we don't understand. And we look at them and we are like, wow, that was cool that they made those. That looks really hard. And yet we can't build them today. When have we built the Great Pyramid of Giza?
Right.
2.5 million stone blocks, an average of 3 to 7 tons. When's the last time we did that, Danny?
Never.
Oh, we can do it though. Okay. Is it going to be a perfect mathematical half ratio of the Earth, Sun, and the Moon that aligns during the precession to Sirius and Canis Major and has a guardian lion that faces Leo with an entire subterranean world that we have boarded up and refuse to go explore? Like, you know the whole Sphinx paw thing, right? The right paw? They have done LiDAR and ground penetrating radar around the Sphinx, and they've identified 4 entryways into the Sphinx. And some of them are super obvious. Like, this isn't a conspiracy.
Oh yeah, I've seen
There's
videos.
One on the head. You've seen it, right?
Yeah.
So there's an entrance on the head. There's one on the rump, on the back, and there's one on the right paw. Okay. When those were brought up to Zahi Hawass and the group, they had a lot of public attention to investigate. And so, like, I've gotten this whole story from the inside, so I know there was a whole team that was involved in doing analysis. That they found chambers, they found openings under the Sphinx, and they saw rooms, and they also saw something down there that looked like a structure, like they don't know what it is. Okay, and so what happened is they brought the scans. This is like in the, I think it was the early 2000s or late 90s. Double check when that was. They brought it. The public got all excited briefly, right? It was in the news a little bit. And so the team, Zahi Hawass and the group, what they did was really clever. So let's put this on record in case it's not on record. They decided to drill to quiet everybody and go investigate, but they drilled in the wrong spot deliberately. So they went several feet in the wrong area, came down and didn't find anything, and said, look, see, there's nothing here. They never even drilled in the place they were supposed to. They never even went into the area that the voids had been found on scans. And so they tricked everybody, and then that's how they're basically hiding and pretending all of these things aren't really there. I mean, you've seen the news out of Cusco in Peru, right? How they've found the entire subterranean connection from Cusco all the way to Sacsayhuaman underground.
This is recent?
Yeah, this was just like a couple months ago.
Really? I did not see this.
The ancients seem to be really interested in the subterranean world. Very interested. in the means that has a connection to what's above. So what we see above in Egypt is just the surface, that it actually is a whole system of things underground that deal with not necessarily the new thing that...
The SAR scans?
Yeah, I don't buy that.
Really?
But we know that there are huge aquifer systems and subterranean areas.
Dude, the fucking labyrinth in Egypt.
There's a lot of stuff like that.
That's like... I just watched Ben Van Kerkwick's whole video on that. It's completely insane. I mean, there's all kinds of writings from antiquity, from Herodotus, from Pliny the Elder.
Love Pliny the Elder.
Strabo, who write about this labyrinth, and they say that it's like 100 times the size of the labyrinth in Crete, that it's like an impossible feat of engineering, even more impossible than the Great Pyramid of Giza. They all say that. They all say it's like a way more astonishing feat than the fucking Great Pyramid, which is insane.
When those things actually come to light and people start understanding the engineering that went into them, we'll understand that they had capabilities that we don't understand today. Yeah, and that's the thing, is that we often will view them as being primitive. I don't think they were at all. Like, I think that they had forms of technology and human abilities that we don't remember anymore at all.
Yeah.
Like, I'll give you an example. This one is probably the easiest example that everybody knows. I imagine you've had this experience in your life at least a few times. Someone you know well, not like someone you don't know. Someone you know well, maybe a family member or a best friend. They're going to call you, and it's an intentional thought. Like, I'm going to call Danny. I haven't talked to that guy in like a month. And right before they call you, they think that, right? Have you ever had that pop in your head where your friend, and then they call you? That's it.
I've had it happen with people that are I'm not even close to. I've talked about it on the podcast before. Like, I've had it happen where like I was thinking randomly in the future about an interaction I was going to have with a guy that I see maybe twice a year, and then 2 seconds later he calls me.
But that's the thing, is it wasn't random. So the idea is more of that thought, you picked it up like an antenna. Okay, so try to think of consciousness as more like an antenna of a radio station.
Yeah.
Okay, and so you picked up on that conscious thought because it was intended for you, right? So it has to be an intentional thought, and that's important here to understand. When we have intention behind our thoughts, we can activate something. We can activate something that goes into ancient telekinesis abilities that we don't really remember anymore. But there's almost like a little bit of the leftover memory, and the leftover like parts of that are still there. They're dormant. Think of it this way. All of these gifts are not gone. All of them. It doesn't matter what they are. They're not gone. They're dormant. They're all dormant inside us. We will activate them again. It's just a reactivation based on activating our DNA with a certain kind of frequency, right?
And it is proven beyond a shadow of a doubt that there's these kids that can read minds now, these nonverbal autistic kids. It's happening. With the telepathy tapes. I had a woman in here the other day who's a mom of a nonverbal autistic kid, and taught the mom how to see without her eyes. That. She was sitting here. We literally wrapped her head in like 30 blindfolds, and he was holding up cards behind her head while she was wearing blindfolds, facing the other way, and telling him exactly what he was holding.
Wow.
I've never seen anything like it.
That's the abilities that I'm talking about. Now imagine that on like 100 times more stronger. Imagine if we were literally like magicians almost. We could create, we could move things with our voice and our sound. To this day, we know that there are still Tibetan monks that have been documented as moving an object with their voice.
Right.
We know that levitation and acoustics are fundamental understanding that this culture had. And it gets even deeper, is like, well, how do they know about like the ratios of the Earth, Sun, and the Moon? How do they know about geodesy, locations on the Earth dealing with like 30th and 40th parallels, building very specifically these certain lines across the Earth? It's like mind-blowing when you start getting into what they knew. Yeah. They knew like everything.
Right.
It seemed as though they had mastered a lot of things of reality and a lot of concepts. And I think that's why they were able to build what they built, because they were masters in what they did. And I don't think any of it was built by hand at all.
Really?
No, I think about it. Like, a lot of people will jump to the idea, oh, maybe giants move them. No, I think that when we look at how it's described, right? That's how we know. Let's think about descriptions.
Is there any texts?
Oh, well, we have to go back to indigenous traditions. No, the texts don't really talk about
the text
them.
wouldn't know because if the Great Pyramid and these like the labyrinth and stuff were built, they would have been way before. They would have been built way before, antiquity, as we call antiquity, right? It would have been if it was before the Younger Dryas.
Yeah, the lost chapters.
There's no way we would have texts from that time.
Some of the cuneiform tablets could have been from that time, or at least rewritten from that time, which is why they're so important and interesting. But a lot of like Vedic and Hindu traditions talk about technologies. They show them, they talk about them. And it's not only that area, but a lot of others. I'll give you an example. The story of Viracocha out of South America. He is told to have arrived in the shores with a group, and they initially were not receptive to him. And so it's described very well that he simply did a magic trick for them, like actually moved something or created something out of thin air. That's how it's described. And so when they saw that, they bowed down and said, like, we'll follow you. And that same story is echoed in other places too. I'm sure in the Aztec realm, it was Quetzalcoatl was their dragon.
This is
god.
Prometheus. This is Enki. Yeah.
Yeah, same thing. And in the Maya, it's Kukulkan.
Right.
And then we see that same equivalent in other parts of the world, like Thoth in Egypt and Hermes in Greece.
Right.
And what it all comes back to is they all are described as being magic. All of them. Every single one of them is described as being magic and being able to create and demonstrate things in front. And then the people followed and they taught them. They taught them everything. And then they left. This is the interesting thing. It's described as them creating places and then leaving.
Right.
And then leaving the people that are there to be the caretakers of them. But the people that were caretakers often, they succumb to violence and ways that it wasn't never meant to be. That's why the Maya and the Aztec were so violent, because it was never intended like that. And originally they went through periods of climate disruptions with crops and things, and they did blood sacrifice and things like that. But the point I'm trying to make is that a lot of those ancient cultures never started that way. A lot of other cultures came later that were just shadows of their former self. And it's sad that they're the ones that are being given credit for such amazing things, and they're not the ones who really built any of them.
Right.
But that's where we are now, is separating what is just more primitive later cultures that get all this credit, and then showing where it should appropriately be, which is basically like a lost chapter, that no one was really able to do what they did after ever.
What do you think? Do you think the archetype of Quetzalcoatl and Prometheus and Enki are something real?
Yes.
Like something physical?
So that,
and if so,
that opens up like a huge thing.
What do you think they were?
Okay, so that is a really, really important and really difficult question to answer, especially for people that haven't studied it and actually read tablets themselves, because it sounds like too fantastic when you describe it. Now, most people in my fields will credit everything with these lost civilizations to aliens. Most of them do. I do not. I don't think what we're thinking about is an alien in the conventional sense.
Right.
Okay.
I agree with you.
So if you take all of the traditions, if you take all of the ancient teachings, if you take Hermeticism, the Vedic cultures, you take the Mayan stuff, the Egyptian stuff, the Mesopotamian stuff, especially the Mesopotamian stuff, take all of them, take every reference to these gods, these Anunna, every single one around the world, they all say the same thing. All of them do, especially the tablets. I counted one time how many times the Anunna are mentioned in different tablets. I have 12 different tablets that they're talked about. So their original name is not the Anunnaki. Their original name is the Anunna. That's the Sumerian term that was the pantheon of gods that were associated with the Sumerian civilization. They describe them as being the origins of everything. That humanity, about the first cities, about civilization itself, they say in the tablets that it came from them, that it was all lowered to them and in very specific places that it was created, and how we are very much more like them than the other way around. That it was described in the tablets that they created us in the image of them. and that we are nothing like anything here at all. And that's why it's so confusing and we're so misguided, is that they just describe, now try to wrap your head around this. They're described as being something far more than like a group coming in a ship or something. They're not talked about that at all. They're talked about as being like omnipotent. They're talked about as being eternal, and that they are fractals of source. Okay? Hermeticism is my favorite one. The conversation with Poimander and Hermes is my favorite conversation regarding that, because he asks about the nature of everything, and like he's talking to Source, and Source is coming through as a dragon, which is really interesting because Quetzalcoatl and Kukulkan are both dragons.
Right.
So is our traditions
Feathered
in
serpent.
ancient China. They're feathered serpents, which is like a dragon. And so over and over again, we see that archetype being shown back. Now, why a dragon? Well, a dragon's just a metamorphosized serpent to its highest form. Simple as that. So the snake is really interesting.
The snake is the same. The snake is described in at least one section as being a feathered serpent.
Yeah, because they're the same thing. That's why the Garden of Eden, Adam and Eve are tempted by a snake.
Right.
It's just Enki. That's why Enki became demonized by later corrupted religions that then turned him into like a demon.
Right.
That's where that whole thing came from. They inverted so many things.
They inverted
so all
many
kinds of things throughout history to make it the opposite. I'll give you an example. We know
and that's why they try to connect. That's why they connect Prometheus with the devil.
Okay, yeah, like let's pull this up really quick. It'll be super easy. Look up the caduceus or the rod of Asclepius, the medical symbol, right?
Yep.
Do we know what that is?
Yep. The snakes wrapping around each other.
If the snake is evil, why is on our most prominent area that has to do with health? Go to an image really quick.
Is the rod of Asclepius.
Okay, so there's two different symbols so people don't get confused. The caduceus is the one with the wings that is related back to Hermes. Okay, now that is two serpents intertwined around a spinal cord, our spinal cord. And the reason they show the wings is that they're showing that if we unlock our chakras of higher consciousness and energy, we basically unlock something. That's what they were leaving behind, is all of the knowledge. And the other version of this is called the rod of Asclepius. That's the one that became the medical symbol in the United States.
Right.
It's a slightly different version of that,
also
but similar.
two snakes having sex.
Well, they're intertwined around each other.
That's what snakes do. And have you seen a video of snakes fornicating?
Yeah.
It's insane. Carl Ruck was talking about this on one of his videos. He's a classical scholar.
Also,
studies ancient Greek.
Two snakes would probably represent the divine masculine and feminine that exists in all of us. Okay? And those two snakes, when they dance and merge their energies in balance, they unlock the highest state we can. That's why every tradition and everything has been trying to tell us this, and we're not paying attention. And that's why those symbols, why would the snake be so evil and demonized if it's on two of our most prominent symbols that go all the way back? Because it was inverted. It was inverted from its opposite meaning. And it goes all the way back to the very beginning. The very beginning of a battle over controlling our mind, controlling our thoughts. And it goes all the way back to the very beginning of that. Again, we just talked about the story of Adam and Eve, right? In the garden where Enki, the snake, tempts Adam with the knowledge of good and evil, and then they get kicked out and they learn awareness and all this stuff, right?
Right.
Why would that be a bad thing?
Right.
Well, it's considered a bad thing because monotheistic religions ended up becoming very controlled. That it all started with the Council of Nicaea.
Yep.
You know about that. And so it was like a put together book with some stories that were older, that were rewritten, and then other things that were used as a form of manipulation, right? We know that Jesus said that the path of reaching him, the state that he's in, is just the kingdom of heaven is found within. He didn't tell you to follow a church or anything. And yet to this day, churches reorganize that message into him being a savior that we have to follow, but we don't become that. Like we can't be our own savior. They flipped it. They switched it around to what was never supposed to be all along. It would end up being a form of control.
Yes.
But in the original form, all these esoteric teachings and mysticism, their whole goal was to take the ancient knowledge of what once was and then incorporate it into us and then unlock basically like our God side. Like we become something far greater. Right. And that's what every ascended master throughout history, whether or not it's Krishna, Jesus, or Buddha, or any of them, have all been saying the exact same thing.
Right.
Every time. And yet we choose to not connect them and listen. And it's profound because we could be something far greater than we are. And we're just being held back by things that are, quite frankly, just like illusions.
Yeah. The crazy game of telephone that has happened with the Bible is pretty astonishing when you actually really look into it.
Yes.
That these stories have been written and rewritten and rewritten and rewritten over time.
With an agenda.
That's another thing. These people, not only do these church fathers have an agenda and the people that are writing it have an agenda, but they're also making money by preaching this stuff, right? So we virtually have zero idea. Like if there is, I mean, a lot of these things are fairy tales, but like I'm sure there are some elements to truth in a lot of it that has been twisted over time. But there's no way you're going to look through just the canon and figure out what was going on 2,000 years ago.
You just have to go back before all that stuff.
On top of that, it's interesting that out of all the biblical literature, 100% of it is Hebrew.
Well, and that's the thing that it's unfortunately it's an agenda by those who are really staunch supporters of the Christian and Hebrew traditions, which I mean, of course you have to dabble and look at all of things, but if you're trying to pretend that that's the beginning of everything and that those predate things that are earlier, that's where I get into issues being like, why are you trying to pretend that Christian and Hebrew teachings are far older than like these Mesopotamian ones or other ones, right? Or Hermetic. No, you can't do that. There is an order of when things came. And that's you were just asking a little while ago about how to find out the real story then. Well, there didn't seem like there was always agendas like later. It seemed as though if you go far enough back, a lot of these ancient traditions and cultures were trying to preserve things in the best way possible, not becoming like a Council of Nicaea, changing it around to an agenda. That whole like mind control thing, that seemed to have come out of, God, at least the Romans, maybe even the Babylonians. But that was not necessarily something that I think has always existed. I think that civilization we're exploring, they seem to have a lot of emphasis and importance in having integrity and honor and being someone really genuine and really highly conscious.
To me, the craziest thing about these ancient texts is that like the biblical canon all comes out of these specific Hebrew texts, right? In the Dead Sea Scrolls. But like classical scholars, what they look at is all the text that was going on, all the literature from that time, from 500 BC or 500 AD back to, the time of Homer, right? 800 BC. They're not looking at just the religious texts. They're looking at the philosophical stuff, the medical stuff, everything, historical stuff, geological stuff. And all of it was Greek. It was all Greek.
Yeah.
Right? All the religious stuff is only in Hebrew, which is a 7,000 word language, 7,000 unique words in Hebrew. Greek has over 1.2 million. The Library of Alexandria, all Greek.
Yeah.
Maybe like 1% Hebrew, which is insane to me. How come there's like, when you try to go back, if you take your time machine back to when Jesus was walking around, the best way to figure out the context to the language or what was happening is you take what the historians back then were writing, what the comedians were writing, what the philosophers were writing, and you try to combine it all, take the words and figure out the best contextual framework for that word. And that's how you come up with a consensus to what that word meant, because there's semantic drift. Words change. The meaning of words change over time throughout centuries.
For sure.
So, and 90% of the language that was being used and was written, all the writers, all the literature was in fucking Greek, dude. It wasn't Hebrew. Just because the Dead Sea Scrolls have all this religious stuff, there's nothing that corroborates it in Greek.
Yeah. No, I think that we need to open up our lens of understanding that a lot of these Greek and other texts like this go back far older than Hebrew.
And by the way,
traditions.
The Wes Huff, Billy Carson debate thing, like everyone says that Wes mopped the floor with Billy, but Billy got a lot of shit right. He just wasn't confident in the way Wes kind of like was trying to structure that argument in a way where he was like showing books and asking him questions about books that he didn't really know the answer to right then and there, whatever. But like Billy was actually right about a lot of things. There's a lot of like ancient historians I've talked to that said, Billy actually had a point there. He just didn't like finish making his point or didn't actually know the context behind it or whatever. So.
Yeah, and Wes made some statements on Rogan that I didn't agree with either.
Yeah.
But we can have debates and conversations.
Yeah, he
about
made
that
a lot
in
of
the
mistakes
future.
on there, but like to Wes's credit, he did make a response to that, like saying like, "Look, I fucked up a lot of shit on the
Did
Joe
he?
Rogan
Did he say
podcast."
that?
He made
Yeah.
a video about it, like
Oh, okay.
basically trying to like for example the Ezekiel thing. He's like, it's not word for word. I messed up.
Yeah, we say things in context, but
Yeah, when you're doing a 3-hour podcast, you're gonna get shit wrong.
yeah. So we're exploring some pretty incredible things. I wanted to bring up Ionis and talk to you about that because I think it goes down a rabbit hole that is connecting to a lot of things we just talked about. That right. So I'm sure you haven't heard of Ionis yet, right? So Ionis was not found until almost 2000. And it was deliberately buried on top of a mountain, and it's an incredible ancient temple. It's built all with andesite and basalt and golden calcite alabaster. But I want you to click that picture, right in the right on the left there, in the middle, that one right there. So I want to show you this and talk about it a little bit because I think it's fascinating. Is that these sites around Lake Vaughan are, I feel like, will be game changers in the future. Big game changers. Number one, if you look at this, a lot of the symbols they have around it, you've matched them around the world into other important symbols. But most importantly, I want to focus behind the altar on the sun cross. Do you see that? Mm-hmm. So that sun cross is a very specific type of cross. It forms a circle. That's why it's a sun cross. And it has, equal arms that come out. Now, when I was looking into the age of this civilization and the evidence we were finding for how much older it was than the Urartians. So traditional archaeologists tells us that this was built by the Urartian culture 2,800 years ago, but they're the ones who built all the mud brick on top and all the castles. And that's what that dirt that's right above that is. It's actually eroded mud brick. Now, that's one of the reasons why a lot of this has been ignored. But Ionis, that cross, if you look at that and you follow it, it brings up some really profound questions. The first one is, number one, how did they create and carve any of those things? Those stones are what's called andesite. Mm-hmm. Those are a 7 to a 7.5 on the Mohs hardness scale out of 10. And for not only that, but if you look, they cut symbols through more than one block, which I don't even know how you would even do that. If you would have two blocks fitted together,
like they did it after the blocks were already put up there.
How would you fit them perfectly together like that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they had to have done it after the blocks were put in place, right?
There's no mistakes. They're all laser cut, okay? And it's one of the hardest stones in the world. But what gets even more wild is that symbol we then find in the highest levels of secret societies and echelons of religion later on. And so if you want to pull up really quick, can you start with that Knights Templar cross? I want to show that really quick. Right there, yeah. So the Knights Templar became one of the most famous groups in history, right? They were protecting and preserving this cross, and they ended up being hunted down and eradicated by the church, right? It's a famous story. Mm-hmm. They were part of an old secret society that was protecting something.
Yeah, they controlled all the money and all that.
That cross is called either the Red Cross or the Knights Templar cross today, but it's based on a solar cross. Now, if that cross predates them by a great amount of time, and it's from Ionis, that's the origins of that entire cross, the mystery just gets deeper and deeper because we could be looking at ancient traditions and knowledge and knowing that were literally lost and still remained in certain secret societies through oral traditions and others, but the actual origin point of where it came from might have been lost. Like they had no idea that was from Ionis because Ionis had been buried for almost 3,000 years. Buried. It was not found until somewhat recently. And so Alexander the Great visited the Vaughan region. Xerxes visited the Vaughan region. If you go to Vaughan Castle, I was just there for a tour, you can see the Xerxes inscription up there. They all visited like they knew that it was a very special place, right? Some of the highest high-profile explorers and people like that in history and conquerors. Mm-hmm. And they went there, but Ionis was buried and never found until recently. And so you start seeing this usage of this type of cross in the highest echelons. Mm-hmm. And it really brings up very profound questions about whether or not it was some kind of an ancient knowing and tradition that went all the way back, but was then lost and still remains. So can you go to the next picture of the Pope really quick in the Vatican? I want to show. Yeah, so take a look at this. instead of having the Christian cross, the Pope is wearing that same cross from the Knights Templar. All the way back to, I believe, is this first one that came from Ionis. And so it gets into some really profound areas of exploring whether or not we could be looking at an entire area of lost history that could redefine religion, could redefine philosophy back to what it used to be, ancient teachings, understandings of sacred geometry, all kinds of things that come back in opening the doors of what this civilization may have left behind for us to find our way back. Let me give you another example. Can you go to that image that's on the left there, right on the left, that T-pillar right there? No, up on the left there, all the way left. Yep. That's from Shavus Tepe. That's right next to Ionis. Now, when we were there doing an analysis and investigation, do you see that? That's the center cut in the middle there. That we found that was exactly 12 inches, exactly a foot. And when we measured other ratios with it, we found that it may be part of the building blocks of potentially even mathematics. So I found also areas that looked like a compass was used to design some of the symbols, and they have this symbol. Now, if you look at what that symbol looks like, if you go to ancient Greece, the capital letter for pi, is that design. And so are we looking at the origins of the basis of geometry and mathematics encoded into these structures and areas around Lake Vaughan? I'm telling you, it just keeps going deeper and deeper, because every time we look into these things they built and left behind, it seems like it's the beginnings of everything that became the most important parts of civilization, like we said, like astronomy, mathematics, even agriculture and other things may have emerged from these places and may have led to everything else that we understand today.
Wow. That's pretty fucking crazy.
So that piece right there, just so you can get an idea how big it is. Can you zoom out to the other one really quick of the other images? And then go up. Yeah, go up to the top second one. That's how big they are. That's around 7 tons. Wow. And now notice it's sitting in situ, still barely sticking out of the ground, right? These sites are the only places in the world where you can find things like this that are not in museums and are still sitting there. You can't find that anywhere in the world.
Right.
They're just sitting there overgrown, and we went there and we just went there with a tour, and people actually found an artifact. Do you have a picture of that? I think I showed you that. Yeah, can you go to that artifact really quick? I want to show in the middle, right in the center, dead center. Click this. That guy right there, his name is Xavier. He came on my tour. It was our first tour we've ever done in the Vaughan region. And I brought him to a place called Kefkalesi. And I showed him the type of, everybody, like a whole group, we had 30 people. And I showed everybody the type of stone we were looking for. I said, look, they carved out of fine grained basalt only. I said, if anybody sees one, there's still a lot that hasn't been found here. And they were doing active excavations at the top of the hill. Like I know the archaeologists and I work with them. And so we're walking on the slopes. He turns over a stone. He turns over a piece, and there's a full, from a basalt relief, that's the bottom of a lion. Okay, now I'm going to show you where it's from.
Oh, wow.
Remember the legs there?
Yep.
Now, can you go to that first image on the top left for me? This came from the same site. Now zoom in on the bottom with the lion. It's the bottom of the lion.
Whoa.
So he found one of the pieces of one of these.
Where is this phone from?
This is from Kefkalesi, which is right next to Ionis around Lake Vaughan. We found a piece of one of these, and it went into a museum. We handed it back to them, and they literally are putting it in a museum. But that's what the point I'm trying to make is that this is like the Wild West of archaeology. You can really find things, and see?
Oh, that's crazy.
So it's actually the left lion, not the right. Yeah. So if you zoom in and look, it's the bottom of the lion.
100%.
And so the reason for that is that those bas-reliefs, those huge ones, there's at least 10 of them. And a lot of them broke off and fractured some of the sides where the symbols were, and they're still there, and you can find them.
It's crazy, the negative relief, like how they were able to do that kind of a detail.
Okay, and based on that, now go scroll up for him when he's based on the relief. Yeah, on the left. I want him to see this. Go all the way up. Now go to the top. Look at those levels. Okay, so you're talking about a solid piece of basalt that's around 50 tons. Okay, now they didn't make a single mistake. They somehow carved, that is 3 different interval levels. 3. They carved 3 interval levels into that somehow without making a mistake in one of the hardest stones on Earth.
That's insane.
We have no understanding for how they did these things.
Right.
No understanding. In fact, today, Masons have looked at stuff like this in hard stone. We're not talking about soft stone. We're talking about granites, basalts, and andesites.
Yeah.
They are saying unless they had like lasers and machines, they wouldn't be able to do this.
Right. Same thing with these vases, man.
Like, I know. So we have no idea how they did these things. No idea.
Right. Yeah, and the crazy thing even about the vases is like some of those vases are so thin they're almost paper thin. Like you can shine a flat. We had Matt Bell in here who owns like
I was just on with him. Yeah,
a few dozen of those things, and he shines the light in there, and you can like see all the light coming out through the granite. Like how the hell were you able to carve something that's perfectly symmetrical within 1,000th of a deviation, and it's like that thin and that one of the hardest stones on Earth.
So can you go take me on an image here? Can you get out of this for a second and go to that Paleo Lake Vaughan map in the middle, right in the center? There we go. Yeah. Okay. Now the area in blue, dark blue and light blue, is the original size of Lake Vaughan. It was less than half of what it is now. Okay. And I want to add this because we kind of jumped over it and missed it. The underwater ruins are right in the area that's called Carbonate Mounds in the northern part. In fact, those Carbonate Mounds were why Towson went to dive in the first place, and then he found those ruins. Initially, when he told the government and others, they didn't believe him, by the way. Now, what I found and discovered is, do you see those dotted lines on a little stream on the very left side that kind of extends out?
Yep.
That was called the Murat River. That used to be the only river outflow to the lake, or that exited the lake. Okay, the only one. Now, what I stumbled upon that's very significant, that may be part of the evidence of dating, like not only the vitrification but others. This is a big one though. Again, how could the ruins be 75 feet underwater and have lake levels that would have been 100 feet different, right? Well, when I found this map, it was based on a whole analysis in the 2000s of a group that was doing soil analysis of the lake because it's an ancient lake and they wanted to get snapshots for like the Earth's climate. So they came up with this lake model. And what is so important about it is it shows that where all those little dotted lines are that are in orange and red, it shows that the lake never used to be there. And why that's important is that it shows that the area where the Carbonate Mounds are was where the underwater ruins were when they were above water. Okay? So that gives you a basis. It verifies where Lake Vaughan's lake was during the time period that I'm targeting, which is before the Pleistocene ended, right?
Okay.
Right before the Younger Dryas. This is where you're gonna know where I'm going here. There is a huge volcano on the south part of that lake called Mount Nemrut, not the Mount Nemrut with the statues on it. There's 2 Mount Nemruts. That volcano is called Mount Nemrut. It's one of the largest volcanic calderas in the world. It's sitting right on the southwest part of the lake. Now, scientists have studied Mount Nemrut for a long time. It's one of the most studied volcanoes in the world. They did core analysis. They figured out when the major eruptions were. They mapped it out. What they found was that the last major eruption that blew the whole top was right at the end of the Pleistocene, right during the Older and Younger Dryas. You ready for this? Giving us dating from when that eruption occurred. When that eruption did occur, it threw so much debris. It was massive. I just got back from visiting it. That caldera is 40 kilometers in circumference. 40 kilometers. That's how huge it is. When that debris flew up in the air and blew its top, it blocked off the only river outlet in the lake, the Murat River, sealing it, becoming the largest soda lake in the world. If you had a bathtub and you had a drain and you plugged the drain, what would happen?
Water wouldn't go anywhere.
It would fill up, right?
Right.
Well, then what happened? Lake Vaughan more than doubled in size. More than doubled. That's what that entire area in red and orange is the current lake today that encompasses how big it is. So if trying to explain how underwater ruins could have been flooded by that much water, you'd have to have some kind of a major geologic event. Does that sound like the kind of geologic event you would be looking for? And so think about it this way: if that's the event that flooded the lake and caused it to be underwater, then all you'd have to do is, because you have the dating of the eruption, it would mean that the ruins are older than the eruption, right?
Right.
And so therefore you can get potential for dating that may help shift this entire paradigm.
Wow.
Which means that they're older than Gobekli Tepe. And I do believe that. I believe that those ruins, what I'm showing you around Lake Vaughan, may be some of the oldest ruins in the world. Again, not primitive, starting from something that's very advanced and then teaching all around the world and then creating things like that. And then they all were like wiped out. But it gets really deep, the implications of Vaughan. And I want to tell you why I'm saying that, because I'm about to show you the same symbols all over the world. Okay. So that would mean that the underwater ruins, we could potentially have dating. Now, can you back out really quick? Go to the, okay, let's start with, go to the top left image of that big relief that we showed, way up. Go all the way up. Keep going. That. Okay, click that for a minute. This was found at Kefkalesi, the same place that artifact came. I showed you the lion.
Yep.
Now, zoom in to the step pyramid design for me at the top. Okay, pay attention to that really carefully. Take a snapshot in your mind of that. Okay. Ready? 3 levels, specifically 3. 3, 3, 3, 3, 3. In fact, what's you know the Nikola Tesla quote where he says, if you want to understand the secrets of the universe, it's through the numbers of 3, 6, and 9? You ever heard that before?
No.
Well, everything is fractals of 3, 6, and 9 here. But what I want you to see is that take that step pyramid design and then take the inverted one and then combine them. Can you look up for me the Chakana design really quick? Chakana. It's the most important symbol in South America.
Chakana
design. Okay, so Chakana, yeah, like go to the left one or whatever. Go to the very left one, that's fine, or whatever.
Black one.
Yeah, so if you take the middle piece, which is like the dividing of realms, and you just take the step pyramids, you can see it's just the top step pyramid, the lower step pyramid, right? Mm-hmm. Well, that's the most important symbol in South America. Okay, now go back to what we just looked at. Okay, now go to the image on the right there with the spring that's flowing over the water, 3 down on the right. This is in Peru at a place called Ollantaytambo. Look, it's the 3-level step pyramid.
Wow.
It's in Peru across the entire world with 3 levels with the water flowing over the very top of it. Same thing we see at a nearby site called Napa and Glacia as well. Okay? And it keeps going. I'm not done yet. Now go back out really quick for me and then scroll. Is that the bottom for me? Okay, then. Okay, go down. You can do the one, the middle down there. Yep. This is in Saudi Arabia. This is called Madain Saleh in Saudi Arabia. Even though it may have more levels, it's still the same step pyramid concept.
Whoa.
Okay. Now I'm going to add one more for you.
What is this rock?
It's a giant stone temple in the middle of the desert. There's more than one that they literally created entire mountains into temples. Okay, now
so they carved this out of the mountain.
Yes, out of a single mountain. Okay, now go back.
That's all one piece.
One stone. Okay, go back for me now to the images. Now go up and right in the center, that one. This I came across and couldn't believe it. That's Cambodia. Okay, across the entire world, the other direction. And I identified these. They're only very specific sites. They're not all of Angkor Wat and Angkor Thom. They're these very isolated temples within that are completely different than the rest. And they're actually considered to be built by a different culture that's not the Khmer Empire. So when I started finding this, I started seeing it around the world like, oh my God. And that's not even done yet. There's more. It was like a blueprint of knowledge that then was all around the planet. Okay? Now go back for me. I want to show you another example. It's wild. Okay, now go to that T pillar on the left, one down from the top. That. Remember we were looking at that? Mm-hmm. Take that concept and then take the inverted pyramid with the steps and then watch what happens. Now go back out for me. Now go, let's see, is it down or up? Let me see. Okay, go, yeah, bottom left. This is from Pumapunku in Bolivia. It's the same T, except they took the inverted pyramid and they combined both symbols. So they see the inverted one, they put the inverted pyramid into the top of the doorway, and then they took the T and they merged them into one symbol. It's really wild. They're all over the place. The same symbols.
Right.
And then go back out for me and then go, see how there's 3 doors on the other one? Go down the bottom and the bottom right, click that. That's the back of the sun gate in Tiwanaku. 3 doors. Center door is the most important.
Yeah.
With the same designs on each doorway.
Wow.
It's like it's had its origins in Vaughn and then passed all around the world.
That's crazy.
Like they're trying to tell us something. They're trying to teach us. And now if you want to know what they mean, let me explain it for a minute. The non-inverted pyramid means above or the heavens. Or I should say the inverted pyramid means the heavens. The non-inverted pyramid means earth. It's our realm. So it's like they're talking about 2 realms of reality. So one would be like this realm of earth, and the other one is above, like the heavens. So it's really interesting that on those reliefs, like especially the Gate of the Sun, because it's an astronomical temple that's to the stars, it's only shown with the inverted pyramid. Only. And every single time they show it, it's the inverted and not the non-inverted. It's like they're trying to show us aspects of knowledge of how it all functions and how it all.
Do you think there was any utility to these structures?
These may have been gateways that take you somewhere.
That's what I'm saying. I'm just like my mind automatically goes to like
stargates to somewhere else in the universe. Like we don't understand, but I'm telling you, these fundamental esoteric principles that are like the most important thing to understand, they're all in these places. Like all esoteric mysticism traditions all came out of this knowledge. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
Like everything came from this. It looks like they were lowering all knowledge. And I want to give one more example. Go back to the images. Go to the very top left again. All the way back up. Okay. Click that one again on the left because there's so much there I have to always bring up. Okay. Look at what's going on here. There you have the god Haldi on the right, which is equivalent of Enki. He's got the pine cone. You see that in murals all around the world. Right. I'm sure you've seen that. But instead of a handbag or a bucket, he has what may be the first cup or chalice in history ever. Now, the chalice or the cup, if you look it up, what it means specifically the passing of a spiritual or religious doctrine. So we know what he's passing. We know that he's passing the knowledge of the most high divine knowledge. Why? Look at his helmet. His like almost like a magi type of hat. If you scroll up, notice what door it's facing into. The center door.
Right.
Remember the Gate of the Sun, the center door is the largest. Have you seen the Last Supper? The famous Last Supper from Da Vinci. The 3 doors are there in the back.
Can you pull up the Last Supper from Da Vinci?
I'm telling you, it's like they knew. Even Da Vinci knew that there was like a deep understanding. Yeah, just pull up any of those. And then, look at the doors in the back. See how Jesus is in the center door?
Yeah.
None of it's by accident. Huh. It's been right in front of us the whole time. There's a deep understanding of the 3 doors represent the 3 aspects of like the universe. And the concept of 3 is a fractal that goes all the way back to us too, Danny. Now, go back to your religious understanding. What was the Trinity? Do you remember?
The Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit.
Or the mind, the body, and the spirit, like soul.
Okay.
So 3 components make up us of what we are. 3 fundamental components. We are the body, we are the mind, and we are the spirit. So they're showing that if you balance all 3 of those things, you unlock something. You unlock a doorway. And that's not the only understanding. There's more to that.
Where did Da Vinci get this from?
Well, that's the ultimate question, is that it's been speculated, or I've read, that he was actually in a secret society.
What?
Yes. That's why his work is codes. And it's like codes embedded in it. Like including the Vitruvian Man and all of that.
Right.
And so you get into this idea that goes all the way back to also the Vedic and Hindu traditions, what's called the Trimurti. Can you pull up the Trimurti for me? Trimurti.
Find that. I got to take a leak real quick.
Okay.
We'll be right back. So what are we looking at here?
So again, we're looking at these concepts and these teachings that seem to pass around the world. You just have to go to India and find a direct comparison to it. So when I showed you that last relief showing Haldi and then his counterpoint on the other side and then the Tree of Life, here in India, you have what's called the Trimurti. Now what the Trimurti is the ancient understanding in Vedic and Hindu cultures about the three fractal components that make up reality. So I mentioned that there was a fractal component that makes us too. Remember, everything seems to be fractals, which is what's really fascinating, meaning that we seem to be a fractal of the entire universe in some ways.
Yes.
It's really weird when you look into actually the comparisons of us in terms of how we are, even like we have the same percentage of water as the earth, like the same iron in our blood that runs it. We seem to be a fractal of everything else. And so those concepts are within us, but they're also on the greater scheme of things. So for instance, in the Trimurti, it's described that there's three guardians that basically manage and balance all of reality. Of everything, that it's not random at all. In fact, that everything is being carefully managed in our universe. And that they describe it as being the center, or we think of as Brahma, their version of Brahma, or we could consider it like almost like the Tree of Life on that previous relief. They consider like God or source. And the reason they often show it in nature is that the ancient cultures believed that source or God was simply in everything, but especially in the balances of how nature flourishes and grows. Like nature itself is God. That's what they described it as.
Right.
However, they state that growing and that flourishing is not the difficult thing to happen. That happens no matter what. It's the balancing of that's hard. That they describe that the two on either side, that's what their roles and responsibilities are in the universe. Meaning that the individual on the right is known as Vishnu, and he would be the equivalent of Haldi. And his role is he is a preserver of knowledge. He is a fertility god, preserver of knowledge, and balancer of cycles. And on the left is what we think of as Shiva, the destroyer.
Right.
Now, that equivalent in Urartian was showed is, well, the other mural is called Shiva. And it's like that everywhere in the world. Like if you look at even other traditions like we see with Zeus and others, this counterpoint is very important because they describe source being the center of everything, and that there are beings that have to maintain both the preservation and creation and balance of life, as well as the destruction of it. So this may help people understand a little bit more, is that the figure on the left, Shiva, his job is literally to be a god of destruction and renewal. So destroying old things and like a war god, like all those things. And whereas the opposite is Vishnu is trying to preserve that knowledge and balance it. Now, why does that make sense? Well, go back to ancient Mesopotamia. What is Enlil and Enki doing over and over and over again in every tablet? Do you know?
Remind me.
They're playing duality gods of each other. Always, no matter what. Every single text. Enki is this god of knowledge and wisdom, and then Enlil is always trying to destroy it. He was the one in the Garden of Eden that banished them.
Right.
It was never really God. It was him. He was the one who banished them. He's the one that creates cycles of destruction and war here and deception. That's his job.
Right.
That's what his role and responsibility here, while at the same time, Enki's job is to maintain balance and basically pollinate the tree of life to continue it growing. So it grows eternally. If we want to try to understand what the way that they describe themselves in all Hermetic texts, all ancient traditions, all Mesopotamian texts, they call them, they're basically cycle masters and time lords. If you wanted to try to wrap your head around that without losing everybody who's listening to this, is they describe themselves as literally like time lords and cycle masters of everything.
Interesting.
Of the entire universe. And that's what their roles and responsibilities are. And that they were the ones who created our solar system so that this story can unfold. and that they've been managing this all along, and that were created in their image to eventually become like them. And that all of this is actually just grooming us to become like we were meant to all along. All of it. And that's why all the esoteric traditions, and why at Ionis, it shows Haldi bending down on one knee and passing that solar cross and all of that, because they lowered the greatest divine knowledge of all time. And it led to what I believe was a golden age on Earth. And that's when they built all the things they did and left behind everything they left behind. And then they were wiped out and destroyed. And then we are putting the pieces back together and finding our way back to where we began. It's all about the wandering and the journey as a microcosm of humanity. Our journey of wandering is part of this. We're supposed to start from a spiritual place of deep connection to the all.
Right.
And we come into a material body and we experience incarnation over and over and over again, as many times as is necessary, until we finally walk that path that I've been describing, that they've been basically screaming at us about, that we're not paying attention to, which is that they're leaving behind the blueprints back to where we began, back to source. And if we just follow them and listen to all the knowledge that they were trying to leave behind for us, we can unlock those doors just like they did.
Now, wasn't the story, the Anunnaki story, that wasn't part of that story that they were trying to create a lower race of like slave species of humans to like terraform the earth?
Be super careful with anything Zecharia Sitchin. I strongly want to put that down right now. Anything related to something like that is usually from Zecharia Sitchin.
Okay.
Not actually from the tablets. And so I want to be really clear about this. Zecharia Sitchin was not a Assyriologist. He was not a translator. He had no idea how to read. It's Sumerian, Akkadian, Babylonian, Assyrian, no idea at all. You look at who the expert translators were. The first one who cracked the code was in the late 1800s, George Smith. The guy is a legend.
George Smith,
and nobody has ever heard of him. He's the one who cracked a language code from the Sumerians that had been dead for thousands of years. Nobody knew how to read it. He cracked the code. That Epic of Gilgamesh was actually the first one that he cracked. Anyway, after him...
So the story of them trying to create the lower slave race of humans to terraform the earth was not necessarily
all
accurate.
Zecharia Sitchin. Zecharia Sitchin, what happened was he wrote a whole series of books, and he tried to base them on being translations and direct understanding from the tablets. And he was the first one to do that, and he created a mess. He created and I think it was very intentional.
And this is what he came up with the idea that there was this planet Nibiru that they came from.
Yes.
Okay.
So what he did is he took pieces of truth from tablets and wove them into a very clever story. Very clever story.
Seems like what a lot of people have been doing.
Yeah. It's like for instance, when we talk about, if we get to astronomical things, like there is a planet out there, but it doesn't come through our inner solar system. So he took that and then turned it into something it's not. And then he took other things, like for instance, areas in the tablets that it's just discussing roles and responsibilities of the Ajiji and the Anuna, and then why we were created, and then turned it around to making it seem like we were created as a slave race to mine gold.
Right.
The whole thing is false. The tablets never talk about mining. They never talk about gold, ever.
Really?
Ever. Not a single time. The only mention of gold in any tablets is that it talks about in the Enkian World Order tablet, it talks about them bringing gold, lapis lazuli, and silver as an offering to the temple. That's it. It never mentions it ever again.
Wow.
The whole thing is bullshit. He made it up, and it's confused everyone to the point where you have two camps of people. You either have academics who believe the Anunnaki and a lot of those stories are just myths and allegories and none of it's real at all. Or you get a lot of people on the extreme other side where they believe everything Sitchin is saying is what the tablets say, and they don't go read the tablets themselves.
Right.
So then you're stuck in this weird place where I'm like, guys, that's not what the tablets say at all. And in fact, they say the complete opposite.
And you're not necessarily reading these yourselves. You're relying on some of
the best translators,
the top translators in the world.
Like a combination of
George
George
Smith.
Them? George Smith and Samuel Kramer are the greatest Assyriologists in history.
George Smith's not alive though, right?
He's passed. And then a third person I would add would probably be Stephanie Dalley on top of that.
Okay.
So the three of them have confirmed each other's work. So that's more importantly to understand is George Smith comes out with all these translations, then Samuel Kramer goes in with his understanding and then confirms most of it, which he did because George Smith is a genius. And then Stephanie Dalley came in and basically confirmed the other two people. And you take those versions only. You don't read any other versions from anybody else because you have to know that the source of what you're getting from is accurate and truthful. And so if you really want to know what the tablets actually say, you go into it, you learn that they talk about how the Anuna are somehow chained to our reality. That's what they use those phrases.
Chained to reality.
Like they're stuck to our reality. It's wild. And that they are basically fractals of Source that is doing the work of Source here. They're not separate from Source. They're not some renegade group doing their own thing. It's not like that. They're described as being fractals of Source, omnipotent. And they're assuming roles in the universe based on what are called natural law. So laws laid down by Source, one of them being duality, polarity, fundamental constants, feminine and masculine energy is another constant, right? They're constants in the universe. They seem to be the ones that are described as playing those roles for all of time. So like Enki is always the knowledge bringer and the wisdom keeper and the preserver of life and everything. And Enlil, his counterpoint, is always the one that is supposed to do the opposite.
Okay.
And it's a never-ending perpetual cycle.
Right.
Let me give you an example. The yin-yang symbol.
Yep.
Okay? You have light and dark, and then inside each of those, inside those fish, like people describe it as, you have light and dark within each self. The light can never eat the dark, or they wouldn't exist for each other. They're in a perpetual balance always.
Right.
That's what Enki and Enlil do.
Right.
Their job is to maintain duality and polarity here.
Okay.
So they're like playing good cop, bad cop, because that's one of the most fundamental things that exists in everything. And so they describe it as some other form of that's like them, like a demigod version called the Ajiji. Okay, let's set this story straight.
Okay.
So we don't have all this misconceptions. Okay, it's described how they came here and that. We'll lay it all out. The Enuma Elish, we'll take the Atrahasis, we'll combine it with the Myth of Adapa. We'll just put the whole thing together, okay? They describe as the Earth being a very special place, very special, that we are perhaps falsely trying to understand that there are infinite like worlds and there maybe not. Not like this, not like what our Earth is.
Right.
That it was actually picked in the entire universe. That's the first thing. They called it Ki. It was not called Earth. The Earth had two names. It was called Ki, like Ki, or Tiamat. Tiamat was the primordial name for Earth when it was violent. They describe coming to the solar system, the Enuma Elish, and the Earth was violent. No life was here.
Right.
We're talking billions of years ago.
Right.
That's why time doesn't matter for them. They don't exist in time. They're higher dimensional, multidimensional beings that don't exist in time or space. Okay?
Which is okay. Right.
They're omnipotent. They can do whatever they want.
Yeah.
They can manifest in anything they want.
Right.
So that's where this whole thing comes from. And so they pick Earth because it's very special, and the Enuma Elish describes it as somehow organizing the solar system. Everything, Jupiter, Saturn, they're all organized as part of a balancer to the whole system itself, which is really interesting. Then they describe how they came here and there was a demi-like god called the Ajiji that worked like almost for them. Like they're really high-level beings. And there's this other form of them that is in physical form that is described as being on Earth and building and doing all this stuff.
Right.
Okay, they called them the Ajiji.
Yes.
And it's described that this is where Sitchin stole it from and manipulated it. It describes as they were clearing the lifelines of the land. I think what that meant was maybe something energetically, but I think it had to do with rivers. Because streams, like in ancient Mesopotamia, in the Fertile Crescent, it's a very arid region. And so agriculture was able to blossom because of using those rivers and using them for irrigation and things like that. Mm-hmm. A lot of rivers like that fill with silt. So one of the theories I have is that clearing those lifelines was actually clearing the silt from those rivers and then using them as a basis for agriculture and all these things. Or maybe he was talking about something energetic. But either way, he used that as a means of mining, clearing the lifelines of the land.
I see.
Like, where do you get that from?
Yeah.
It does talk about how the Ajiji revolted. That's true. Mm-hmm. It talks about how they revolted and didn't want to do these things in this physical world any longer. They didn't want to do it. They were like gods like them, and they felt like the responsibility of being here and doing these things was way beneath them. Mm-hmm. So they revolted. That's what the tablets describe. They went to Enlil, they stormed Enlil and said, we don't want to do this anymore. There needs to be another solution. We don't want to maintain this world. Like maintain the world, the physical world, all the different things that go along with that. So they had to come up with a plan. The plan was they decided to create mankind to alleviate all those responsibilities. But it talked about not only that, but becoming them eventually. So it wasn't like we were created to be a slave or some kind of a lower form of life. In fact, it's quite the opposite. Before people jump on that notion, I will jump to the myth of Adapa. And the myth of Adapa, can you pull up the myth of Adapa really quick? ADAPA? I would love you to see it for yourself.
And didn't the Anunnaki start like mating with the Ajiji?
They may have had some interaction with not the actual text. Can you get the actual translation? Myth of Adapa translation for me?
Try ChatGPT, bro.
Yeah, if you can look up, please give me the in ChatGPT, please give me the translation of the Myth of Adapa. I need you to read this because when you read this,
make sure you say please.
Please.
So it doesn't come kill you when it becomes all mighty, when it turns
into
a god.
I have a relationship with mine. So when you read this, it's going to fundamentally change your perspective forever.
Okay.
Are you ready for this?
I'm ready.
Because this gives us the answers.
Oh, really?
Yes. The Myth of Adapa is the oldest ancient text ever written.
Okay. Adapa and the food of life.
Let me see. Wow, this is not a good version. Hold on. Let me see if I can find it. This is a perfect example of a version that is not the original version.
Interesting.
Because I know the wording is different on this. Mm-hmm. Hold on, let me pull it up. 1 second. Myth of Adapa translation. I'm going to find you it because you're really going to love this.
Okay.
Let me see.
Tablet 1.
Yeah. Okay, this is it.
Okay.
You found it. Thank you. See what I'm talking about? How difficult it is?
Yeah.
Okay. So let me. I don't have my glasses on, so I have to
I can read it.
Can you read to read right to here and then pretend that's a period? Okay.
Okay.
Go ahead, because the world needs to hear this.
Tablet number 1, Myth of Adapa. He possessed intelligence. Okay, Steve, what are you doing? All right. His command, like the command of Anu. He, Ea, granted him a wide ear to reveal the destiny of the land. He granted him wisdom, but he did not grant him eternal life. In those days, in those years, the wise man of Eridu, Ea, had created him as the chief among men, a wise man whose command none should oppose. The prudent, the most wise among the Anunnaki was he.
Okay, so you can stop right there. It's telling us about the figure that became known as Adam. His original name was Adapa. This tablet is the oldest single written record in human history, period. The Myth of Adapa is considered the first Sumerian tablet that's ever been recorded in terms of for its age. It's one of the oldest tablets ever written to mankind. And it tells us profound things.
This is the oldest written document in history.
Yes. The Myth of Adapa. It's the very beginning of everything. Now, what's really interesting here are a couple things. Number one, did you see that he says he was been created as chief among men.
Right.
That he's basically perfect. Remember like the description of Adam?
Yep.
Okay, now this is the line that really brings it home, though. The most wise among the Anunnaki.
The most wise among the Anunnaki was he.
So what it's saying is that the first man, the first perfect man, named Adapa, the first great sage from a city called Eridu, the first city ever created, that he's considered the most wise among the Anunnaki. So what does that mean for us? We are the Anunnaki. We are them. We just don't remember anything, and we don't have any of the gifts anymore. They're trying to tell us that we started in a place where not only was he the most wise, but it's described even further. If you go to the Nag Hammadi scriptures, the secret book of John, it talks about how Enlil became jealous over how perfect man was, and then deliberately threw him into, that's what it says, threw him into a lower form of existence to trap him. So we were created by powerful fractals of source that are like omnipotent creator gods, right? And amongst them, we were created in such perfection that we were more wise and potentially more powerful than even they are. And because of jealousy by the gods, by them, specifically Enlil, he creates an entire world and hides us in a veil of war and deception and confusion to lock us in an eternity to never remember who we really are.
That's powerful, bro. So we are them.
Yes. And we have all the gifts they have. We just don't remember or have them unlocked yet. We are, now look at how we're perceived in the world today, how we're taught, right? Darwinianism, we're just a survival of the fittest species that's destroying everything around it. And we got here only because we got smart and the luck of the draw. It's the complete opposite of that. We're like a divine being of the universe. So what are we doing killing each other and doing all these horrible things? Do you know what happens when someone kills someone?
No. What happens?
They are the judges of all. You ever seen in Egypt where they show a feather, the symbol of the analogy of it, the metaphor, a person's heart on a scale being weighed against a feather? You ever heard that before or seen that?
No.
That in ancient Egypt, it's a depiction that's commonly seen, and it's very known, where they are the judges of our entire existence. That every single thing you're doing is being judged. And that the way that you can unlock higher places is because those things are allowed to happen. Like you earned them, and you proved through these trials and tribulations that we don't even know are real, that everything we're being judged on. They call themselves, it's the most amazing term, they call themselves in at least 3 tablets, the ordainers of destinies, that they're literally in charge of everything. And that there's a really fine line between free will and destiny that we don't really understand. And we don't have as much free will as we really think. That's really what it comes down to, which is good, because let's face it, I don't want to be at the mercy of some madmen. They're going to send off a bomb and blow us all up.
Right.
So if we're not really in charge, it gives me a lot of peace of mind, knowing that there is something much higher that's actually governing a lot of the path of humanity.
Well, I mean, if there is a God who is all omnipotent and all knowing, that means God knows everything that's going to happen in the future.
Yes.
Which means there's no free will.
No. There isn't actually really free will, because time isn't what we think. There's no beginning and there's no end. Time is like a giant circle,
right,
as it's been described in esoteric traditions.
Right.
That there is no beginning and there is no end. That it's a giant circle, and that the whole point is that we start somewhere and we get completely lost. That's the fun in the game of it, the story. And then we find our way back. And it's through those unexpected and impossibilities of us making our way back that makes it such an interesting story.
And if we were to advance to a level where we can figure out things like 0-point energy or crafts that can manipulate gravity, well, that means we create time travel machines.
We in conjunction, we have something that global golden age civilization didn't have. They may have had all the knowledge and being like masters of their physical body and the metaphysical. But they didn't have the kind of technologies we have. And so I like to think that.
How do we know that though? Like,
they don't leave anything behind showing that.
Well,
they have some technologies.
We have ancient texts and depictions of these angels or like UFOs, if you want to call them that, right? Like Ezekiel's wheel, and throughout the Middle Ages. Are they symbolic
though? Are they? Is that like a literal thing though? That's the thing.
Is it? I don't know. Is it like this
question.
Whole UFO phenomenon? Like how far back does it go? Like how far back were these things flying around? Are they the Anunnaki? Have they just become some breakaway civilization who's here that we can't see?
I think that most of what we're seeing is secret government technology. Most of it. Because frankly, do you really think that a civilization that reached such astronomically conscious levels in morality to be able to go to some star system somewhere, do you think they're just going to willy-nilly like pollute another culture like without even caring? If you're able to reach the level of traveling the stars, you would have to develop a certain conscious level or you would destroy yourself through technology. You would never, there's like a gatekeeping concept there that seems to be very established, that you're not allowed to do certain things. Like, Danny can't create an empire on Earth with the most powerful weapons known to man and decide to like go destroy the universe and go destroy everywhere else. You're not going to, you know why you won't be allowed to do that? Because you will end up self-destroying yourself before you ever reached heights with your consciousness and your multidimensional side. If you the technological side of developing weapons and that kind of mentality always is self-destructive. Right, Empires are always unsustainable.
Right. Well, maybe, yeah. Even if it is like secret stuff that the government has, maybe it's not stuff that they developed. Maybe it's ancient stuff that they found that's been here the whole time.
That's the question that nobody knows.
Like, for example, in this labyrinth, in this Egyptian labyrinth, there was a guy who found that there was a big structure when they did those satellite scans on that labyrinth in Egypt. He said that there was a massive 130-foot long object that was not wood, it was not stone. He says the only other material it could be based on those scans was metal, a metallic object that was the size of 150 feet long.
I would like to believe those things. The problem is that, number one, what kind of technology is he using? Does he know how to read those scans correctly? There's a lot of questions still that I would want to ask before I jump on something like that. The problem I have is that studying every ancient civilization around the world and everything they left behind, they don't seem to have any depictions I can find of aliens. It's the Anunnaki seem to look.
It doesn't have to be aliens. It could just be.
It seems to be the Anunnaki over and over again. Is what I'm trying to say.
Right.
Like over and over again.
Right.
Like they're the ones who are responsible for all this, not someone else.
No, I'm not saying it's someone else either. I'm just saying that this is some sort of time travel. This is some sort of time travel that the Anunnaki could have figured out.
Yeah. Yeah, that's actually what George Smith.
Maybe they were future us.
Well, that's the other really interesting thing you just said. Because let me tell you, George Smith, again, the great hero of translating and figuring stuff out before anyone else ever did. He knew more about the tablets than anyone. He read every single one, right? He broke them all down. In his book called The Chaldean Account of Genesis, at the very end, he summarizes his understanding. It's really profound. And he says, and I will paraphrase, he says that the only thing that makes sense for him about the Anunnaki, this is before it became like a dogma that you couldn't talk about in an academic world.
Right.
Okay? This is the 1800s. He said the only thing that made sense when he read every single tablet was that the Anunnaki seemed to come backwards and forwards in history.
Right.
He called them time travelers.
Right.
That's what he said in that. He said that that's the only thing that made sense to him, because the Enuma Elish is talking about them here with like the creation of our solar system.
Right.
That's like billions of years ago. And yet then they're also here at every other interval and every other time. So I think that the big thing that's going to shock everybody in the future is realizing that we're part of some kind of like a closed system in which it's being governed and managed. I think that will be what shakes everyone the most of anything. It's not even necessarily who we are. I think that will come, but I think it's more or less like what we're a part of that we're not aware of.
Yeah.
And then people will be like, I don't want to do any of this stuff that I'm doing, And I think that there's a danger to that. And that's why all this has been hidden, because, Danny's not going to want to go flip burgers at Burger King anymore.
Right. Yeah. I think the whole idea of disclosure is not about
extraterrestrials. I think it's about exposing like a greater control system that could be like what you were explaining earlier. You know, who is controlling all of this? Who are the people above us?
The Gnostics call them the archons. So the archons mean ruler. So they call them that. And they talk about them as being the rulers of reality. And that's why this might sound crazy to people on the surface, but I strongly encourage people to go read tablets like you just read. Go read the Nag Hammadi. Go read the hypostasis of the archons. Like, it talks about it. They seem to have a deeper understanding a long time ago than we do now. If anything, it's been lost. That's why people like Zecharia Sitchin did so much damage, because when the only people that was talking about it then throws into like left field and makes everyone think it's not real.
Right.
So then I came along. I was like, well, what do the tablets actually say? What are the best translations? And that's what led me down a lot of this rabbit hole that I did.
Yeah, that's kind of like the double-edged sword of like technology and like the proliferation and ubiquity of media nowadays with podcasts and YouTube and all that stuff, is that like it's a lot easier to find out who is full of shit and what's real. You know, even though AI isn't accurately translating ancient texts yet, I'm not sure.
I think it is now.
But like the story of Atlantis is a great example is like how that story has been bastardized over time.
And I actually come from a completely different angle of that, to the point where I feel like I've found some evidence that actually brings a lot more credibility to that entire story.
Yeah, the Atlantis story is fascinating. Like when you actually understand the real chain of transmission with Atlantis, you realize how fucking crazy it is. Like if you think the chain of transmission with the Bible is crazy, Atlantis is that on steroids. Yeah, because it was transmitted orally for 1,000 years before Solon.
Yes,
and then it was passed to the Egyptian priest who had no records to corroborate any of it, and then it was passed down to Pliny the Elder, and then the Younger, and then it, eventually gets to Plato, ending up in the Timaeus and Critias. Like it's crazy.
There's a whole facet to that story you may not know.
And Plato wasn't a historian.
No, he was a philosopher.
Yes.
Okay, so I guess I should bring this up because you just brought it up. I have a whole nother angle that may give validity to the Atlantis story that people don't talk about. And I found it in digging into a very interesting individual named Plutarch. Have you heard of Plutarch?
Oh yeah, I've heard a lot about Plutarch.
Okay, so Plutarch, he came hundreds of years after. He was actually 400 years after Solon visited Egypt. Okay, Plutarch's story is a dangerous one because Plutarch brings credibility to something that's supposed to be an allegory, like nobody else does. So I would also encourage people to look into Diodorus too. Yep. Very interesting.
Yep.
But you're very well versed on this. So let me see if you know this. So Plutarch he's a very unfortunate individual that what he's known for is almost unknown. And what he is known for is somewhat irrelevant. Okay. So Plutarch was actually a temple priest. I don't know if you know that, of Delphi. So he was actually a temple priest of Apollo at Delphi in Greece. He was a pretty high level individual. He was, you could call him the last of his kind, because after him, everything changed. And I'll tell you what I mean by that. He was a great philosopher. He was a temple priest. He was a mystic. He knew a lot of knowledge. And he has been totally glossed over in history for some reason. And so I've been digging into that and found some really interesting stuff regarding that. So why is Plato's work considered an allegory and not real? Well, Plato doesn't give us any specifics about who these temple priests are that Solon meets with. He doesn't actually say any names. The only thing he says is the name of the temple. He says it's the Temple of Sais, S-A-I-S. So that's all we get. So what happened was scholars came back and said, well, Plato made the entire thing up. None of it's true. The only part of that story that's true is that Solon did visit Egypt, right?
Well, also all of the people around Plato were constantly saying he was a liar and he was full of shit, including Aristotle.
Well, I think it's because there was a mandate and there was an effort to basically disprove and quiet that whole narrative. Like, for instance, Socrates was murdered.
Yeah.
Right? Socrates was murdered. He actually ended up being able to decide his own death. Did you know that?
Yeah.
So he picked hemlock
Yep.
because
Instead of leaving. Yeah.
Plato was devastated. Socrates was his great mentor. He was devastated. I think that was why he hid a lot of that information as an allegory, because I think they would have killed him too. I think Plato hid that information because he knew the nature of the world that he lived in. Okay, that's why I think he did it. But the reason why scholars and academics don't think the story is real is because they think that it's only based on Solon's visit to Egypt and that everything else was made up. Okay? But what Plutarch brings is credibility to that early information that nobody else has ever done. So what happened? Well, Plutarch came out with 2 books. One was called The Life of Solon, and another one called Moralia that has a chapter in it called Isis and like Ishtar or something. And it is 2 different parts of his work that have been like ignored by history. So anyone listening to this, go look up what I'm talking about. It will blow your mind. Because, and I actually have a really cool quote that I will read that I don't know if anyone in the world has ever even heard yet. I'm very excited to do that. So, he writes these 2 books. They get glossed over. They get kind of ignored, which is really strange. And I've looked it up with ChatGPT and I asked why that happened. And they think that it's because people end up focusing on Plato and basically just somehow ignored Plutarch.
It's funny. All the classical scholars I've talked to, they all hate Plato.
Do they?
They all say he's boring.
I think he's the best. He's amazing. I love Plato's work. It goes very far beyond just talking about Atlantis too. So anyway, Plutarch ends up providing these details in his works that anyone can go look up that gives credibility to that entire visit that Solon went on in a way that changes it from allegory to fact. And the reason is, when we look at the Plato story, it's just that, Solon met with like a hypothetical, like a priest in a temple.
Sure.
And you're like, okay, like you can just make that up, right? Okay, fine. Solon went to Egypt, fine. But the rest is probably made up, right? No. Plutarch knew details. And why he knew details? Well, Plutarch took a very interesting trip, if not trips, to Egypt during this time, and he did a lot more than Solon did. He went to nearly every ancient Egyptian temple, including Amun-Ra and all these different temples, and he met with all these different priests and learned about ancient Egyptian history. One of the things he did is that he went to the Temple of Neith at Sais, which is where the entire story comes from that Plato talks about from Solon. It's this temple that is supposedly not real, right? It's like a mythical allegory. Well, Plutarch's like, no, it was a real temple. I went there. And not only that, he has an inscription from one of the things that was written in the walls. And I can read it.
Okay.
And I don't know if anyone's ever read that before. To have it come out. But let me say a couple other things before I read it.
Okay.
He names the 2 temple priests that Solon met with. So instead of being like this hypothetical thing now, it's 2 very specific individuals. The first one is known as Sonchis, Sonchis. His name is Sonchis of Sais, and he is a priest that is in charge of that region, that temple. Meanwhile, another priest from Heliopolis comes up from the journey to meet because they hear about Solon coming.
Is it the story that it was a priestess that he met?
No, 2 priests. So one of them is Sonchis.
Okay.
And the other one is a priest from Heliopolis.
Okay.
And his name is Xenophis. Xenophis is his name. Do you have that up?
Sonohis, yeah.
Yeah.
Sonohis and Sonus.
So he meets with these 2 priests that are supposedly the greatest elders the greatest elders of wisdom of anyone that was alive.
Okay.
Like they're the 2 individuals that knew ancient history and information that nobody else knew anymore. They were like the last 2. And that the entire Temple of Neith, the purpose of it was a temple of knowledge. But not just knowledge of the current times, it was a temple that was dedicated to the knowledge of everything, like the past civilizations, what they knew, the stories of them. And that's why Solon was able to learn the story of Atlantis. And that the walls actually had the story inscribed into it of Atlantis. Now, and this is where it gets really interesting, is that Xenophus of Heliopolis he writes all about those two temple priests, and then he talks about how when he went to the temple, he wrote down the only inscription that's ever survived. Because after he left, he went there 1,940 something years ago. After he left, the Romans and others destroyed a lot of Egypt, and it was lost.
Right.
So the temple of Neith at Sais was never seen ever again. Plutarch was the last person.
Here, fix your mic.
Plutarch was the last person to ever potentially, at least a philosopher or scholar, to potentially ever visit the temple of Neith ever again. After that, it was destroyed and never seen ever again, which is wild. So he says this in the temple walls. He wrote down one of the inscriptions. I don't know why he didn't write all of them down. I don't know, but he wrote one down.
And where did he write this?
In his book. It was from his chapter in Moralia called Isis and Osiris.
Isis and Osiris by Plutarch.
Yes.
Okay.
And so it's in a body of work called Moralia.
Moralia. Okay.
Yeah. So if anyone wants to look it up,
Okay.
this is what it says from the temple. You ready for this? It's from Neith. So Neith is like the Egyptian equivalent of Athena in ancient Greece.
Okay.
Okay? It says, I am all that has been, is, and shall be. No mortal has lifted my veil. How wild is that? It's beautiful, isn't it?
What does it mean?
Well, we have to figure it out. But the point is that...
What does it have to do with Atlantis?
It shows you that then the conversations that we then pick up with Plato, the temple priests say to Solon, you Greeks remember one deluge, but there have been many, primarily of water and fire. And he then goes on in the Critias to describe and say that this entire story is not fiction, but is based on a real story that has been recorded in the temple. What I'm trying to say is, if we get validity to who the temple priests were, both of them, that the temple was real, and we have all of that, then at what point do we then say, at what point is that information that's being told from Solon fact or fiction? Is it all true?
Right.
Is the entire thing true? You see what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, I see
It
what you're
then
saying.
makes it a real event, a real place, that real things were being described to him. Does it make any sense? Let's go the other way for a minute. There's two priests that we know are real. There's a temple that's real. We know they visited. That was all real. Why then would they meet up with people like that and then tell them a bunch of bullshit? Or not tell us anything like they said at all? If he made the whole thing up, then what did they actually say? More importantly, maybe that is what they said. Is what I'm trying to say. Is at what point does it become them talking about something that they didn't even say, that became like an allegorical myth, versus something that Plato used as a real world comparison example of a civilization that became corrupted.
Yes.
As an example against another civilization, which then implies, and we have evidence archaeologically to prove it, that Greece had a proto-civilization before. He calls them the Athenians. Do you remember? In the Timaeus and Critias, Plato says Atlantis went to war against another democracy, another civilization. He uses
advanced civilization. Yes.
He uses the Athenians, the proto-Greeks, as a model for a perfect society, right?
Right, but Atlantis existed according to these texts, how long before Athens?
He only tells us the date of its destruction. But he says that at the time.
But yeah, so its destruction was how many thousands of years before Athens?
Well, Athens or pre-Athens? This is what I'm getting at, is that...
Well, we've excavated all the way down to bedrock.
Oh, we've found... There's a place called the Pyx Wall. Can you look it up, really? It's PYX. It's in ancient Greece outside of Athens. I might have not spelled that correctly. No. It's a whole wall. It's an ancient wall. PY...
You want pictures?
Pyx
Yeah.
Wall.
I'm not spelling it right. I'm gonna get blasted online about this. There it is, right here. There it is, right here. That's the wall.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the wall. That is your pre-Greek civilization. That is your Athenian civilization. That wall has some of the largest stones In fact, I think it's the largest megalithic stones in all of Europe. And the level of masonry is absolutely superior to anything we see in the Greek culture after. When they built after, they built with colosseums and different designs with limestone. This wall is right in outside of Athens, and it has not only massively perfectly cut blocks put together,
Right. Look at that angled one right
but
there.
each edges has three levels on each corner, like that concept of three that we had talked about. So when I read about this Athenian civilization that is fighting against the Atlanteans, I actually take it as fact. And that what we're looking at is the reason why Greece flourished as such a democracy is because they preceded a much older and more ancient culture that was there. And most of what it built was destroyed and didn't survive. Being its proximity to the Mediterranean, it was likely a massive tsunami probably destroyed almost everything that we had of that culture. And that wall, called the Pix Wall, may be one of the only things we have left to prove that civilization ever existed.
Wow. Where exactly? This wall's in
Right
Athens.
outside of Athens. And if you look at all the architecture in Italy and around that area of Greece, the surrounding region, none of it looks like that. It's all called Cyclopean building. But
So you're saying so you're even though the
those are all fit together individually.
even though the archaeologists have excavated Athens down to its bedrock, you're saying that there was a completely different civilization that was built right there on top of it before?
And very little of it survived. Very little of it survived. We're talking about tsunamis during those catastrophes that may have been miles high. Miles. Completely obliterating everything. And so why did that survive? Well, that wall was probably in a really particular location in that maybe it got kind of buried or something. I don't know, but it survived. And there's no other architecture in Greece or even surrounding Italy that looks like that. It's like completely out of place.
Yeah.
And it happens to be right in next to Athens. So we know Athens was very important.
Right.
And so that's where I get into looking at this from the standpoint where even though Plato may have turned those civilizations into an allegorical example of a corruption versus non-corruption, it may be based on a literal real thing.
No, I agree with that. I agree that the allegories translate into real life, just like the allegory of the cave is very relevant to society today. And
Exactly.
I think the allegory of Atlantis versus Athens, even if it was some sort of a hypothetical war game, could easily have been modeled from reality and something that has happened in the past and can repeat in the future.
Aren't most of those lessons taught to us through whatever religious text or others are based
myths,
on something real that then is a perfect example as a lesson to teach?
Yeah, totally.
Right? You wouldn't just create something hypothetical. It'd be based on something real, which is why he had so many details of Atlantis, the rings, the rings, how many of there were, its location, and why in the Azores we have what is clearly, like conversations I've had, really good ones with Randall Carlson, clearly a submerged continent underneath there.
Yeah.
The Azores.
Yeah.
Which is exactly where Plato described the location of Atlantis being. And now we have just the volcanic tops of those volcanoes.
Right.
And if you look, all you have to do is go look at Google Maps with aerial imagery, and you can look at the Azores and see an entire subcontinent that basically sunk, which is exactly what Atlantis is described as not being destroyed. It's described as sinking underneath the ocean.
Right.
And so if you have plate tectonics, what is at the Azores at that location? It's one of the only places in the world where there are three plates that come together in one spot. You have the Mid-Atlantic Ridge, the Atlantic Ridge, others. They all come together at Eurasia.
Yeah, if you look at pull up the oceanic tomography of the Azores and the surrounding ocean basin there, it's crazy.
And so you have a place where three plates come together right in one spot, and you have evidence of submerged continent, and it's west of the Pillars of Hercules. It has all the parameters. And so I think Atlantis was likely a global civilization, but that location, the Azores, was where the city that was described by Plato was. It's the city, the central city. Like, for instance, if the United States was a country that covered a much larger area somehow, and DC was its capital.
Right.
Type of thing.
Yeah.
Like that kind of concept.
Yeah, that makes sense. Wow.
All you need to do is pull up even just a Google. You can just use a Google Maps and show. Just go to the Azores. You can see it.
Yeah, you can see that. They're
Yeah, here you go. Pull up satellite for me. Oh, the satellite. Yeah, don't zoom all the way in yet.
Layers. There you go.
Stay a little out for
Boom.
me. Yeah. Okay.
Look at that.
Go in a little bit now. Look right in the center. You see that entire shallow landmass. The
Yep.
darker blue represents deeper waters.
Yep.
And so lighter is shallower. Now look, it's an entire convergence of where they're likely that's
Tectonic plates.
A continent that what's called sank, and you can get that if you have a type of fault that basically sinks and subducts. So it's
Right.
called a subducted fault that can create a situation like something like that can happen.
Yeah, man. There's a whole, and as well, there's theories out there that the Eye of the Sahara could be the Atlantis, but
There's some problems with that theory though.
Yeah, there's
it's at like
problems.
1,400 feet elevation.
yeah, and
so-
that whole part of Africa is like super unexplored. Like no one's ever walked around that area, that reshot
well, it's
structure.
really it's
inhospitable. Yeah,
it's
yeah.
like a dangerous
crazy.
place.
It's
Yeah.
a crazy dangerous place. But
Yeah.
it's just fascinating that no one's actually been there and like documented it on the ground. People have flown over it, but
So why is there nothing left? Well, it looks like those tectonic events and what happened to it were so severe that nothing could survive. Nothing. So when people are saying, what's the evidence of Atlantis? I point to things like that wall I just showed you, to things like Ionis, to things like in Peru and Bolivia and Egypt. I think that is all Atlantis. It was just a globally connected civilization that was all sharing knowledge and was all maritime.
right.
They were
Right.
all just traveling around. Like it was the whole world was connected. But I think they were living in conjunction with indigenous groups at the same time.
Yeah, just like we are today.
Exactly. Which is like, think about who the Inca were, right? Well, I think the Inca, they were only around for 400 years or less. And we're crediting them as building with some of the greatest megalithic structures on Earth. And yet they have very primitive building on top of this amazing stuff, right? It's more likely that what we think of as the Inca were actually a group that was living perhaps closer to like the Amazon rainforest, and that area was not impacted, but the higher areas were, okay? And that culture that built everything in the highlands of Peru were wiped out, and that the Inca were just people that wandered up there and then found it and then adopted and built their whole culture around it.
Right.
That's what we may be seeing around the world in a lot of cases, are civilizations that know that something is there that's important,
Right.
sacred,
Right.
and then build on top of it and try to incorporate a lot of it into their culture, but lack complete capabilities for how to build it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're right. And try to model it and try
Yeah,
to reconstruct
exactly.
it in their own way as well.
Exactly.
Well, Matt LaCroix, thank you for doing this, man. This has been fucking mind-bending.
We'll have to come back. I'll have to do the whole dead star thing with you, the whole binary
Yes.
thing. We'll have to come back and do another show.
Definitely,
Because that's
yeah.
another rabbit hole in itself.
I would love to do that.
All
man.
right.
That would
No,
be
I
fascinating.
appreciate this conversation, Danny. I really like talking to you.
Yeah, of course, man. Tell people out there where to find your work and your books, all that stuff.
Yeah, please check out my website, thestageoftime.com. My YouTube is Matthew LaCroix, and I'm on Instagram, The Stage of Time. I'm in the process of editing to finalize the documentary. Yeah, thank you. To finalize the documentary, I'll be editing for a whole month, and then we're going to be releasing it next year, Q1 or Q2. It's going to be huge. We had 10 experts from around the world join us. 3 archaeologists, Dr. Robert Schock, a geologist. We had Robert Edward Grant. We had all kinds of people join us. Yeah, thank you. And we went around the world to explore what I just showed you to find if it's valid. And we put a documentary together that basically asked the important questions needed, but rather than just telling people how to think, we just simply take everybody on an adventure to all these hotspots, show all the connections, show all the evidence, and then ask questions and let people decide for themselves. But I'm hoping that in conjunction with my new book, that they are the things that finally shift this paradigm. It's long overdue.
Well, I appreciate your work, man. There's not many people who have the enthusiasm as you do for this ancient history stuff. So it's much appreciated, man. We'll link everything below, and we'll definitely do a part 2.
Thanks. I look forward to it.
All right. Good night, everybody.